please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. We have minutes from September 21st and October 7th. What is the wish of the board?
Let's move them both.
Both have been moved. Look for second.
Second.
Moved by Nate, seconded by Jeff Kelly. Do we have any changes to the minutes? Edits? Nope. Additional discussion? Everybody's good? All in favor of the minutes as written?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Let's carry that. Okay. Public comments? We have maybe some public. Tina? Go ahead.
I have a couple. We need signage for this driveway, for when the buses are in the driveway and there are 300 kids running out and not paying attention. Twice in the last week, I've had to pull kids out of the way to not be run over by cars. It happens often that cars don't realize that kids are running out because they can't see around buses. And cars drive incredibly fast in this parking lot when they're coming down towards the building, which makes no sense, but that's what they do. So twice in the last week it's happened, and I've had this UPS, the mailman, parents who don't pick up or drop off often don't realize they're not supposed to be down in that bottom circle. So we just need some kind of signage, whatever it says, buses only, or no cars, or something to that effect, just to keep this from.
Yeah. Can we look into maybe getting some of those, just to slow cars down, maybe beneficial, get some of those poly speed bumps you can just lay out? You wouldn't want it down when it's snowing, but you can just kind of dragging it out of the way. That'd be worth doing.
We're just talking about out back.
No, we're talking about
front.
No, out front where the buses line up in the morning and in the afternoon. Parents who don't realize, I think, that they're supposed to go to the back door for drop off or pickup, will come where we're parked thinking that must be where we're supposed to do that because there's all the buses, and there is room for a car to get by. And when we try to, we'll try to stagger the buses so that there isn't room, they'll drive on the lawn. I've seen that happen too.
So
There's staff out there too, and
There is, yeah.
If we catch them, we stop them.
But I'm the last bus in the line. I park last.
park sideways.
I know.
I try,
It's
and my red
65
lights
feet
are
long,
on.
right?
My red lights are on. There's no reason that a car should be going around me, but they think the laws don't apply in a parking lot. I don't know that signage would help either, but it's very easy to put up a sign. We put up a new sign out back for the Name That Road contest every year.
So that, I mean, that's safety stuff. So
Yeah.
you know, and the speed bump thing, if they're relatively reasonable, I think they are. You can probably sure that we have outlets to get those. And then if you worth looking into that, and then
Hopefully we can put a message in the bridge as well.
Yeah, they've done that in the past too. You know, to
On the
remind
cover of the
parents.
bridge, make it big and bold, and say this is a problem and needs to stop.
I mean, it was twice in 1 week, and I literally had to pull kids out of the way
Yeah.
because the cars were flying through.
I was gonna say like a pedestrian barrier, because then it's like literally like a mini fence. Whereas a speed bump, somebody's gonna see it, they're gonna slow down, but they're gonna still drive down there. No, sounds like they're not supposed to be down there anyway.
Well, I think just slowing the cars down in general is not going to hurt, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, we have cones. Are we looking on, like, can we cone that area off so that,
Just enough room for a bus to pull in. And
or
cone it.
hopefully a couple cones there, even though the buses may go around?
I would be happy to put the cones out after I park.
Yeah. Do we have cones?
Not road cones, but
Yeah. So if we
I
got,
mean, we have cones that are for
if we get like 3 or 4 road cones maybe that we can position, just have them stacked up out there. So if you're okay, you know, pull
I
in,
have no problem
you can
doing
drop them
that.
across the entrance as well. Because once the buses are in there, nothing else should be going through that cul-de-sac.
No, because the kids aren't looking. I mean, there are 300 kids running.
Gotta get off the
Sometimes it's 500 kids,
It's only
maybe someday
it's
it'll
only
be 500
150
kids.
right now. So.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. So yeah, if you guys can just work on that, that's a valid concern. Anything else for us, Tina? Yeah. See, look at that. We solved the problem, hopefully. We're still in citizens' comments. Any other citizens with go ahead. I think that's Christina.
Yeah,
Okay.
Chris Maker. You didn't catch me with the mask now, you really have to.
You're sneaky.
I was gonna write my comment out before I started talking, so now, I just wanted to, bring to the attention of the board the fact that, and I don't know, I started this the agenda, so you may have already approved minutes before, but I just wanted to bring to the attention of the board that the minutes that are uploaded or updated are out of date as of September 2nd meeting. And that the videos of the meetings on YouTube were not up to date, as of Monday, when I specifically requested that the video be uploaded of the prior meetings I wanted to prepare for this meeting. So I just want to point that out because, and I don't want to throw anybody under the bus or anything, but I just want to point that out because as a parent, if you can't make it to the meeting, those are your only avenues for getting the information of what transpired. And without that, what do parents do but turn to their friends and say, hey, did you go? Or read, posts on social media. And I'm sure I don't need to go into why that's the worst way to get your information. And it's not accurate and it's not in anybody's best interest, I don't think, to get your information that way. So I would like to request of the administration if they could please attach the approved minutes from the school board meetings to the Friday email that is sent out with the bridge after they are approved at that month's school board meeting.
Any other citizens' comments? Surrounded by staff and Kelly. All right. Agenda review. Patty is not here tonight. She couldn't make it. She's here via the little screen behind Gigi. So if it starts flashing, it means I'm in trouble. Nate?
Could I add something to informational?
Sure. What do you want to add?
It has to do with basketball. Or winter sports, I guess, really in a general sense.
For DCS or for Parks and Rec, or we'll get into it then?
Yes, and we'll get into it then.
Okay, fair enough. And with Patty not being here in person, I think I'd like to table policies for tonight and move that to the next meeting. So everybody's okay with that?
Yes.
I'm seeing nodding. Okay. So we're gonna strike section 6 for the evening. Any other agenda review items from any of the other board members? No? All right, moving on. We have one consent item, and if it's something we are comfortable with, we can deal with it now. If we want to discuss it in further depth, we need to hold it for non-public. And so I believe probably non-public.
I would say non-public.
Discuss these things
Yep.
then, so we're going to move that to non-public. Which brings us to our bus routes. And Kelly from Dale, you're up.
Okay. So you all received like the morning pages, right? So I sent you 2 sets of routes. One set shows what all it looks like with usually with all 7 buses. We had all 7. So you can see that the counts require us to have more than 1 line to keep social distancing on the bus. Yes.
So today, you're running how many elementary buses again? I need the 30,000 foot view, okay, so
We're
running.
still running 7 right now.
And when do we lose a driver to some other district opening back up?
You have to start on the 16th, so we use the 13th is the last day will happen.
Of November,
Yes,
okay. And then that's one driver?
that's one driver. The other concern I have is possibly the Concord counts, keeping a close eye on those.
Okay, and we're, at the moment, we've taken a Concord, just a high level again, we've taken a high school bus from Concord and then applied it to our elementary
Right,
efforts.
right, and then maybe and separate the kids and take them to the.
And high school's working at the moment?
It's right at the moment. I do not post routes on purpose, so that families would call in.
Okay.
Talk to us, so I knew when we would arrive, and, we could add them to the meeting, that's why I keep counts, so that kids would just show up, and then that concerns me,
Quick question. You said in your email and also in person, if Concord's numbers go up, what do you mean by if Concord's numbers go up?
We need ridership, so.
Okay.
So we have, obviously, Mongover is our than the other on one side of town, it seems to work, and it's opposite the other day. Right now, the numbers are in the low twenties when they're put together, so we're okay. I think some families ask to be put on the buses, because they're not using it because of the backup. So that's helping, but this is the first week where they've had a full week of hybrid. Last week they started doing public classes, and had SATs, and nothing was normal, I guess. So this is the first week that we're getting to look at it and maybe see a better idea of it.
Okay, so for the high school end of the equation, it sounds like you can just continue to keep us apprised of that. And if we want to discuss it further, we can discuss it.
Okay, so
Further.
that was another piece that was worrying me about trying to figure out
Okay.
how to make this work.
But if high school's working right now,
Okay.
I think, are we comfortable as a board leaving high school alone and not trying to reinvent that wheel?
Yes.
Andy?
Concern that Kelly had, that we're,
Well, for high school, I'm thinking we don't need to be concerned unless Kelly tells us we're concerned on the high school front. Is that
Obviously, there's
fair?
a little bit of time to adjust if we decide to pull that bus and have to go all the way to
Okay, all right, so that's a conversation that needs to occur and let us know, so we can shelf that.
Okay.
And now we can get into how you can do anything with DCS. Thank you.
So the two sets of routes, the first set, shows the use of 7 buses. One scenario shows us going out and getting the furthest out kids and bringing them in as much as we can possibly fit on the first trip, dropping them and going right back out to get the second trip. If you look, there is somewhere in the 8:15-ish, between 8:10 and 8:15-ish, bringing that second group in, if you're doing right back to back, and obviously the second trip is getting you close to the school kids. The other scenario in the 7 buses, and it's the same for the second set as well, is a suggestion we have from the school, looking at maybe breaking up K4 and 5-8 to see if that would help the numbers and help with staffing, obviously, after school. If kids have to wait there until, in the first scenario, we just do back to back, so kids have to stay and wait, and some kids are going to be late for the meal. The team talked about previously, like needing each case for short ride. In this case, it's not short ride, it's capacity. We want to stick with the social distancing, and these are very fine-tuned numbers that we change again. So we have to keep our eye on them, and we have to adjust again. But that's one scenario. The other one, we actually need an hour difference in order to turn around, get back out, get the next week, like say the 5 to 8, and bring back in. So essentially doing the whole week of that. We can eliminate some stuff, so if there's no kids in that grade level, so that saves a little bit of time, but it's not a ton. So the kids who are, so the second group, the second group would come in for an 8:50 start, rather than 7:50 start up to the K4. So that means they're going to get out at 3:40. So if we're talking anywhere from 4:15 to 4:30, the second group will take the day 10. So that's the suggestion that I worked with to see what you guys thought. It's something, but obviously.
So we have, there's contractual items, right, that are gonna be, with any of this stuff, there's contractual items, obviously, that need to be considered. Have you guys had a chance to review any of this in your, like, is any of this taken into consideration with the planning that you're gonna present to us later?
Of course it is.
Of course it is. And are we jumping ahead if we ask you what you guys have looked at, or?
Probably.
Okay, so should we just wait in suspense?
That'd be a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, but we could answer, like, I mean, we don't want to give too much information. We want you to stick around for.
We can't wait.
So this discussion is all about if we go back to full open. This is the scenario we're talking about. Okay. Have we? Do we have the? Is everything worked out before we get to that? And correct me if I'm wrong, or you can decide what you want to do. But have we figured out the six? If in 2 weeks we're getting down to 6 buses, do we have that figured out? That's sort of a more pressing.
Shows you 6 buses.
But that's not the fullback. That's the half. Okay, what about the hybrid, which as far as we know is still in 2 weeks, we're still gonna be hybrid. Do we have it, is it working with 6 drivers, which happens in 2 weeks, it sounds like, before we start laying out what it's gonna look like if we're full back, which we haven't really committed to yet?
Yeah, I can work that out. I was going for all of these things to have an idea, not knowing how long you're going to stay in here.
Right, but at the moment, if our status quo stays as hybrid, Dale has us covered for transportation under our guidelines.
Yeah, we can work with whoever, what we work, whether that's 5 months. Because if you're hybrid, you have less per day on there, you have more flexibility. Even if it's a buses, you can move, but.
Okay, so are we at the moment comfortable with that aspect of it, Nate, or are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, no, that's fine. If we can make it work with 6, then I'm okay. Was my question.
Yeah, so this is gonna be a redundant question, but, so I'm absolutely clear. If we stay hybrid exactly as we are and we lose our driver November 13th, you're gonna be able to shuffle the routes so that we're still able to meet the busing needs November 13th. Okay.
Like I was trying to work out ahead of time what was going to like, we had to go on 5. That's not a fun picture.
We call that flopping and twitching where I come from,
Yeah.
and sometimes we just have to do it.
Yeah.
When that happens, which it looks like is imminent in the next 2 weeks, how do you, I assume it's, I guess maybe this is a question, whose responsibility is it to notify the parents that there's going to be a different pickup time and it might be a different color bus and the routes are going to change, and so that the parents can have that information, let's say like a week in advance so they can prepare for that? Is that your responsibility? Is that our responsibility? Is that administration's responsibility?
I would normally, depending on what we're doing, I would send it to Amber or to Chris and Brian so that they can send it out to the families.
Okay,
Post the routes as if it were the beginning of the school year.
okay,
So that they can see what's going to look like the very day.
okay.
So, another question, I'm only floating this to the board for the sake of it, it has a significant impact on our, transportation. So we are currently using every other seat on the bus and allowing siblings to ride together, giving us a capacity of 26 kids. So we are not using half the seats on the bus, it is allowing us to maintain social distancing. Obviously, siblings are in the same house anyway. Does this board at this point have any interest in changing that guideline for Dale?
I guess the question I have for you, Kelly, is if we change that guideline, do you have a flavor of if we're going to lose drivers? And how many do you think we would lose?
I think probably at least a couple.
So, I guess that's like my starting point is more so rather than, we can put as many kids on the bus, but if we don't have the drivers,
For
so.
me, if we don't ask the question, we don't know, and if the board could very easily reaffirm and say we want to stick with the guidelines we have in place, and that's where Kelly is currently planning. But I also feel that we should at least have that as part of our discussion, and I think Amber beat you to it. Nate, Amber, go ahead.
I just have a quick question. The bus drivers that you anticipate potentially not staying on if we were to change that number, are those buses full currently? Or is there room to move?
Well, we can break things up in a lot of different ways. We just obviously have to, and what I was doing instructing, I have this many on this road, and this many on this road. If they go over this way, they can go here, that one can jump over this side. And we basically, let the game affect it, people this one out and move over to the next. So, I mean, we can shuffle to a point to make those people comfortable. But obviously, we need to obviously think about parent stuff as well. About the big thing, their comfort level. I mean, we were driving about when you're telling me it's chilly and the windows are down and going on yards. And I think the kids have been pretty good about wearing masks. So those are all positives.
I had one tell me that he was breathing on this recycled air and shouldn't be doing it. And then there was another group I heard over the radio one day that they refused to put masks on, so he did not get a ride to school that day. So a couple, but you know, there's always a couple.
All right, so to that extent, are we looking to continue, Nate?
I would say that it's been, as I've looked at the numbers and the map and how things have been changing in terms of the outbreaks of this virus as it goes through different school districts, it feels like many districts surrounding us have closed down for a small period of time here or there. And maybe Patty has more information, but as far as I know from the state, that it seems like many schools in the area have been shutting down maybe for a week or two. I don't have hard numbers to back that up at this point, but we've not, and that's great. And I wonder whether there's a lot of variables, but what we're doing seems to be working pretty well, and we have not had any, instances that require that step, and that's great. So I feel like I'm leaning towards sticking with what we're doing because it seems to be working.
Is that the consensus of the board?
I don't know what you're asking, because I think the problem is that I'm open to looking at putting more kids on the bus, but I don't think we can do that without knowing what the impact is going to be on how many families are going to then pull kids. It's trying to make a decision based on, yes, that solves one problem, but it creates two other problems.
So I'm more asking for the sake of, as we look at planning stuff, right, and planning for the potential of having everybody back in the building, if we can bring all the kids in on one run, it impacts their planning. And maybe if you guys say we planned around it, we're good, fine, but I'm just trying to think of there's a lot of variables, right? So you have to discuss all the variables. That is one of the variables that has an impact on how you plan. Are we staggering start times, or are we doing double running the buses? How does that impact contractually? How does that impact staffing? Or do we look at not double running buses? And we have to give somewhere, and we have to take from somewhere, and so for me, it's more just part of the conversation is there flexibility or not on that subject. So if there's no flexibility with transportation and it's going to be a max of 26 kids per bus, fine. Kelly continues trying to plan for 26 kids a bus. You guys are planning for 26 kids a bus, and maybe we look to the community and say, okay, for this to work better, we need more cars to show up here, which probably causes other problems for you, but these are all these variables. Like it's infinite, but if we cross things off.
That's another concern that when we're all in the November, there's going to be on the bus. And then we're really sorry. Because we're already, if you look at the numbers, the first trips are like 4 o'clock to get them and go to, I have to turn around the bus and go back the other way and come back. That type of thing.
Yeah.
The numbers could make a huge difference if more people decide that it's their bus.
I think double busing is a much easier solution than worrying about losing drivers, right? So if we come up with this entire plan based upon filling the buses full, we have a great plan, but then we lose 2 drivers, we've built a plan that's built on a.
This is why I'm trying to get the conversation out now.
So I would be more in favor of, staggered start times than more kids on the bus.
So I'm seeing over here that you both are more along the lines of let's keep the bus capacities limited to the current guideline. And again, this is just, I'm trying to eliminate variables.
I think the discussion is important, as you said, and it's so weird to not know the impact of whatever decision.
We've been operating under that for the last 3 months.
It is,
So I think right now right now we have seats staggered on the bus, so in one particular row, they don't have somebody sitting across from them, is that correct?
Yeah, we're using every other seat, right? So it'd be
And seats each row.
a seat in each row. And then siblings can sit together.
So we're basically saying that we would potentially have one person in each row in each seat. That's kind of the thought about
No,
using riders.
so hold on. So a bus has 26 seats on it. Okay, so we are currently using 13 seats on a bus, but we will allow siblings to sit together. So that gives us our capacity of 26. Typically, we'll go as heavy as 3 per seat, which gives us a capacity of 77. What this would allow us to do is potentially get a capacity of, say, 52 kids per bus, or maybe a little bit higher if there's 3 siblings.
And we usually don't fit well.
Yeah, but I mean, so potentially using every seat in every row, say 2 siblings in the same seat, but that's not, only children will obviously be in the seat by themselves, but siblings would sit together, which allows like my kids to torture themselves for an extra hour.
Yeah, and right now we're using, as we talked about, they're wearing masks, two kids who are not able to sit in one of those 13 seats.
Yes,
So we're still trying to, we're not gonna leave the same as bus stop.
right, no.
We're gonna do what we have to do.
So the effect of that though is, if we were to say we'll use every seat, in every
Right.
row, we just doubled our busing capacity.
Right.
Like that. And so, two members are most comfortable with not doing that. I'm not advocating for anything, I'm just trying to eliminate variables. Gigi and Andy would be the two wild cards now, is do we wanna stay the course, or do we wanna discuss how it could affect planning for everything else by doubling our capacity on the bus? Obviously, we know there's potential things other things that need to be taken into consideration, and again, I'm not advocating for anything, I'm just trying to weed out variables.
I guess some of the questions I have around staff, contracts, length of pay, those sorts of things.
If we double
did-
run.
Right.
Okay. And we can get into that, I'm assuming, in our conversation with them.
The only notion in my head on why I might support increasing busing seats on bus is, are the kids currently sitting, 6 feet away from each other in opposite rows? So,
I don't get on a school bus, ever. But, you're a resident expert. Kelly, you're not, but Tina.
They're 3 feet, because there's 18 inches between seats, and if you're every other, then there's 3 feet between, so if the
They're at the
guidelines are
minimum.
3 to 6 feet.
Well, it sounds like we're gonna hold the course for the time being.
yeah,
Okay.
everything goes back down.
We're done talking about that. Okay, so then, any potential planning is gonna be based around that same 26 number. Kelly, is there anything else you wanna hit us with?
I don't think so. I think we got it covered, I think one concern was talking where what your advice on that, where you want us to go. Just keep an eye on it and let you guys know and we can get back to you. Of course, we don't want to do that, we don't have to. We can do the extra hours of that.
Andy?
I just wanted to revisit something that made it asked. So if we had 6 buses at our current hybrid model, we're good with 6 buses.
Yeah, we can do that.
And then I think I know the answer, but if we go 100% all back in with 6 buses, what does that look like?
So either way, whether we have 7 or 6, we're gonna do multiple runs. There's one bus that doesn't have to right now, that's purple. We've got 26, but one is in the morning. In the afternoon, we've got providers, so that's going to be
So if we did go back full all in with 6 buses, that purple bus would then just have to do 2, and that's the only change.
Use 7 buses. With 6 buses, we just do break up A route and A route to the others. And that happens to be one of those, so that we can really break using, or the other, combo with them as well, so that they're in very same areas, so that's the
And we're still, again, just keep in mind, our agreement with the staff is a 2-week notification, so at any point, our actions can give you at least 2 weeks of time to get your thoughts.
So what's the earliest you would be looking at, maybe when it's going
I mean, at this point, even if we took action tonight, we'd be 2 weeks, and we wouldn't do it in the middle of the week, we'd start on a Monday. That's assuming we took action tonight. I don't know what the board's intent is to that regard, but we're looking, the second week in November, basically.
I kind of think that the 6 bus scenarios have November 2nd, if we do November, once that part of the week, so that can work.
Well, they just can't, they belong to us now. Possession's 9/10 of the law, we'll put the vehicle sticker on the side of the bus. Is Anybody else have questions for Kelly? Alright, I wanna thank you again for your efforts. I know this probably has not been the most fun year to be in your position.
In an email, Kelly had worked, she had mentioned she worked over 100 hours on this adventure, so.
Oh,
thank
goodness.
you,
Every time
Kelly.
I got like in a certain direction I'm going along, something changed. Okay.
And we're not the only town.
Oh, no. Some of them that are already in are doing okay.
Do they have extra drivers?
No, right? Peter? No.
No, unfortunately.
Even Norfolk's not gonna have all their drivers when they go back. They're gonna be short too. So, just,
Yes.
have you guys seen the bus public service?
Yes.
I've been reading it there, and,
I can fix the sign for you. Yeah, the sign, if you
Yeah.
want people to line up,
Yeah.
starting at $50 an hour. Problem solved.
I can't afford this for that.
Yeah.
But we've actually got some people, interested to come in and see us, so.
Great.
I hope
And
we
you're-
can stand up, so that's been better than anything else we've done.
And again, just for the board or anybody that listens, from the day that you hire, we're still 6 weeks. So if you hire a driver 4 years
Yeah.
ago,
And, yeah, the DMV,
It's 6 weeks.
staffed up a little bit as well.
So when you start to hire drivers, are we first in line to get a bus to the airfield?
so yes.
Sure. We know we're the hardest hit, so.
So your bus drivers will go to those areas, right? Okay.
If possible, can you continue to, I know these meetings get a little tiring, but is it possible to at least ask you to continue coming back every couple of weeks to?
Just give me the right thing.
I'll make sure you have the date.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Kelly, and I suspect that based on the outcome of, another one of our conversations later tonight, we may be able to give you a little bit more input on what
Yeah,
the sense of the
take
vote
a
is.
look at those and when you get a chance to really look at them and see what I've done to try to put things together to make them work the way they look and get an idea of what we do. So,
Excellent. Thank you.
I'll touch base with you tomorrow either way, just so that you know whether decisions on anything's been made or changed.
sounds good.
Thank you, Kelly. All right. Next up, we have review of correspondence. So we received a few letters, over the week from a couple of parents. Everybody have a chance to review those?
Yes.
Okay, I think, in all fairness, I think a portion of that conversation regarding what we received is really gonna get hit when we get into reopening planning. Is that a fair enough statement to say? And so I think conversation will revolve around that and probably hold until we get into that discussion with the administration. Okay. Let's see. Amber, that brings us to the 2022 budget round one.
All right. So everybody has a booklet?
No,
Some
is
of you
there
are
one
new, so
more?
you haven't seen this before.
Is there another booklet?
Yeah, everybody has one, I put one in, oh, well, you didn't sit with your,
Yours was
I
snapped.
actually stole the staff off that desk because it
It's
was.
the penalty for coming in
there
late.
were 5, there was one for everybody.
Is Amber still on?
No, I asked for one thing, for this
Oh,
one,
you did?
right? There's
It's
the-
I didn't look at it online too. Do you need that? If you need it,
No,
I
I have
can
one
look
right
online.
here.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right,
All right.
Amber, we'll let you go.
All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is just kind of walk you through what's in this booklet, just because there's some newbies at the table. So within your booklet, you have, the proposed budget, which goes all the way to page 15. On page 17, those are the rosters that support the budget. You're going to see two groups of rosters because you're an SB2, so you have default. So you have a regular roster and a default roster. I've outlined a cover page before it, but the other way you can see the differences is because the very top of it is grayed out. So like the title, so that you can tell the difference between a regular roster and a default roster. what follows that is we've got some detail to back up, some of the numbers within the budget. We have the co-curricular athletic budget data sheet, as well as, starts on page 34, or actually 33. On page 37 is the maintenance budget data sheet, so that's kind of all the detail that supports the figures on those sheets.
And these are all, everything from, the athletic budget and so on is all for the proposed budget, not
Yep.
the default.
All proposed. High school tuition is on page 40, and that's the information that supports the number within the budget. I have the district assessment, which most of you probably have seen from the SAU meetings. Then on page 44, I have the food service budget. And then very end, I've also added in your trust fund balances. So those are the documents I have for you tonight. In the near meetings coming up, you'll also have revenue and tax impact, but those have not been completed at this point. So, let's start at the beginning. On page 3, I'll just kind of give you a brief overview of the budget, and then you can either ask questions along the way or at the end, whichever you choose. If I get to something and you want to give further explanation, just jump on in, okay? So, the way this budget is developed, you're gonna see multi-colors. There's a lot of colors going on. And the reason being is there are certain, things we like to point out. One is anything that's a decrease of 10,000, anything that's an increase of 10,000, anything that's non-discretionary, meaning we can't touch it because it's contractual, or it might be special ed. All right, so we're going to look at the orange, the dark orange line. That's your proposed. Okay, the dark orange is the proposed. The light orange over to the right is the default. So in the first line, line 12, you're going to see an increase in that line. The reason being is we ended in default last fiscal year, or for this current fiscal year, and we had proposed some additional positions last year. And so in that line, there is a math position and there is a 0.25 of a wellness position that the district has on the roster. The other change is there was also a CBA that was voted in 2 years ago. So that's also going to show moving forward. You'll notice in the default column over on the right in the light orange that number is different. That's because I had to take out the 2 positions that did not make it in the default for this current year. You will, when you go to the rosters, you'll see on the rosters, on the default rosters, those positions that didn't make it in there, I've grayed out so you can clearly see which ones made it and which ones didn't.
The name that's attached to that on the roster isn't necessarily, it's the position straight out, not the person.
Well, it's there is a name, but it not necessarily might not be that person.
It's not that person.
It's the position.
Right, there's a position, but it has a name attached.
Correct. There are certainly many times people get moved around in positions. It's not necessarily means it's that person, it just means that position doesn't make it into the budget, should we go to default. That's not to say that we can't fund that position in other ways if we choose not to spend something, but the actual position does not make it forward.
Right.
That's per the guidelines, state guidelines.
Right.
What does sum of longevity mean under the roster?
So there is a stipend that is given to employees once they've been here for a certain amount of years.
Okay.
And so those individual employees have met that threshold, so they
Okay.
get an additional stipend for that.
Thank you.
All right, let's see here, so substitutes, we've upped substitutes a little bit. It's really difficult, we really can't go through past numbers last year because we obviously, from March on, we were not in session, so we did not utilize substitutes at that time. So even though we've been around the 45,000 threshold, a few more dollars we believe should be needed moving forward.
Yeah, so all of our actuals are really to March 15th. In a lot of cases, for the things that would be affected by ADR.
Right, and not just that, I think we have to take that into consideration, but I think the other thing that's really important to also take into consideration is that, some lines may not have been spent because they knew they needed to buy certain things in order for them to be able to teach remotely. So in order for them to fund, one line might not have been touched, but another line might have been touched a little bit more. Or they may have said, you know, we're not gonna buy this, we're gonna wait and to do it for next year because we really need this to make sure that our students have what they need to do remote. And do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
The tuition line on line 29, these are estimated figures right now. I did get the number that's listed in there from Concord is the estimated number that I did get from them. Their high school tuition number is for $13,702, 703 rounded. Their capital fee is $517. Co-Brown number, that number is going to change. That number is last year's number, but I've not received an update yet. So that one, it potentially will change. The one for PA may change as well. I'm still finalizing that number, so that's an estimate right now. So potentially that might change as well. It will not, the PA number will not be a drastic change, but it may change a little.
Maybe you're about to get to this, but there must be a change in number of students?
Yes, the number of students is 191. And I don't have my one from last year to remember what last year's was.
Because that's a pretty big jump. I mean, that's a few students.
The rate went up, but the number of students did too. I wanna say it was
186.
180, yeah.
It's the number that's in my head.
It's mid-80, 180s. I think it was mid-80,
Okay, we just said that the small class, but we're sending out the bigger class.
Yes. And, we have that information on page 40. So, we have 59 eighth graders starting ninth grade. And that's estimated as obviously what we have on roster as of today. That could change between now and when school starts next year.
So, if I can ask you, Amber,
Of course.
when we prep this to go to the budget committee, can we have the budgeted number from last year as a, just a noted line in here? So if we were budgeting for 186 last year, so when people are looking at an increase, we can say, well, there's tuition plus 10 more students than the previous year.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
It just, I think it makes it a much easier conversation. Not that there's anything to do with the number is what it is. But
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
let's justify the increases in the budget. So I think it's right there.
Yep, absolutely.
Amber, can you remind me what the capital fee is?
The capital fee is, they have two charges. I think it's, I'm not totally positive, to be honest. I mean, there's a tuition piece and then there are other pieces that they break out. I think they're for, I don't remember what they're for.
It was like just wear and tear on the building.
Yes, it's like more of like a facilities operational standpoint where the other one is more instructional,
Okay,
from my understanding.
got it.
So they may have like a project or something that might be part of that capital fee,
Okay,
that they would then
like a
disperse out to
percentage.
all of their
Got it.
pupils.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry, brain cramp there. Alright, let's see here, page 4. We don't really have any big increases on here. We've added in notes over on the left. So any increases, we did have an increase in math a little bit, adding in some 7th and 8th grade Eureka, some items for Eureka. On line 71, 73, and 75, there's slight increases in those. We need to do some updates on consumables, some extra supplies for some science. We need to replenish some of the classroom libraries. Yes, ma'am?
Question about the Eureka line.
Yep.
It looks like I guess I didn't realize this had happened, but it looks like with the default vote this past year, that math line went down. Was that, have we been doing Eureka in 7th and 8th grade as we had planned? Like, was that a plan for this year?
Last year we bumped it up to 6th grade. This year, 7th and 8th grade are both doing it this year for the first time.
Currently they are.
Correct.
even though this line was bumped down because of the default budget.
Right, so what they'll have to do is we'll have to find that funding in another line to cover it.
Or balance out, or not get something in
Yeah.
replacing that.
And, but we are doing Eureka though this year,
Oh,
in seventh and eighth
absolutely,
grade.
absolutely.
Okay.
And that will happen in, I think, several lines throughout the budget, is if there's something that they really felt like they needed, but it didn't make it in the default, then they have to figure out somewhere else where they're gonna pull that money from.
Okay.
And they, not just them, but many of the schools do that.
Yeah.
Let's see here, on line 89, on page 5 is new furniture fixtures. And they're looking to start the phase 1 of the library furniture, new science lab tables for 6th and 7th grade. So those weren't in there previously, they're looking to do that. Yes.
So I see 6,300 for the new science lab tables.
Yep.
With $1,000.
No, the 6,300 was for the library phase.
And then additionally, they need some science lab tables.
Which line are you on? Zach?
That's line, 89.
89, but 89 is going up
It's
a
going up.
lot more than we've expended out of that in the past. I mean, we voted it and we had actuals of 55, so it's another,
Well, probably because they're starting a cycle but a cycle plan to replenish furniture. So
Okay.
this is phase 1, because it's phase 1, it wouldn't have occurred in previous years.
We tried to get it in last year's budget, we had a phase 1 in last year's budget that we divided between, this new furniture line and a replacement furniture line, with the total phase was $10,000, but we divided it between two different, lines.
so we're
So
also.
we tried to get it in last year, we ended up in a default, so we're trying again this year to get it in.
Yeah, I mean, any line that you see, like, for new furnishing, if you see a 1, I can guarantee we budgeted money there, but it had to come out because we ended in default. So it could be a year that we're not gonna get it this year, so now we're gonna try again for next year. Line 93, it's going up 1,000, for, computer and network equipment, although it says the appendix, we don't have an appendix for that. So I need to take that note out.
Oh,
But do you know what it's for?
there's an appendix in the, I don't know if it's printed.
It's not, I didn't put any
Oh.
IT appendix.
Gotcha. I was looking up my maps. and-
That's okay.
So.
How is line 93 different than line 100?
Then 100. So 1 is new computer network equipment, 1 is replacement. So 1 is new and 1 is replacing something that's already been in fruition, it's already here. On line 95, instructional equipment replacement, they're looking for a smart board replacement there.
We had asked for 15,000 last year, because we have aged Promethean boards that we're trying to get out. This one was replaced last year, we got a new TV in there, we put into a default, so we didn't get any of them. So we sit now, but now even more of them are going for next year, so.
What's the life expectancy on a Promethean board?
Oh, they've been around for some of them from, I don't know, but Bob has them all laid out for 2000, from 2000, 2012, like which ones were purchased what years.
Yeah, I was gonna say the first one was over here at least 10.
At least 10 years old, so those are the first ones, those are already going out, we've already had to replace those, we've had to find the money somehow.
So, how many does that buy?
Well, and when we replace them, we'll be replacing them with, the television sets that are in there, the touch screens that they're, and those are about a little less than 2,000, about 1,500 to 1,800 a piece. Ish.
I would say, 1,500 mark.
Which is down from that one was like 2,200, so they are going down.
So that should get us somewhere around 10.
I would say so.
Is that line just for those boards? Or is there other items?
No, that particular line is strictly going to be
So
to replace.
approximately 10 of them?
On line 93, why are you only asking for $1,000? Is that really going to give you your new computer? And is that enough, or is it underfunded?
If it's a laptop, it should. Is that what it,
Chromebooks are a couple
or
hundred.
Chromebook?
Yeah, but Chromebooks show up further down. Chromebooks are in line
Right, if you're buying new Chromebooks, does that count as replacement, or is that a new
Yeah.
computer?
It's in 100.
That's a replacement.
I don't know what it's for.
I'm gonna look it up for you, whether, maybe it's network equipment.
Yeah, I'm assuming that's Bob's line,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna go with whatever Bob says he needs, and
This seems
see, it doesn't
low
sound
and
enough.
arbitrary.
I don't know. So the next one on line 97 is furniture fixture replacement. They're looking to do a replacement rotation for classroom and some library furniture for phase 1. So there's some replacement and some new. So that's why that note is made twice.
Okay, so,
So there might be something that they're trying to replace, and then there's also some things they don't currently have that they would like to have.
is it cleaner in the budget? Can they, well, they're different, account codes,
They're
but
different accounts, yeah,
they have to be that way, we can't just have replacement and
yeah. No, we
new.
need to split them up for reporting purposes.
So I have an answer for you.
Okay,
The focus is more on the network part of that description, and Bob's note is that, we're limited by the SAU on network things with certain brands, so we need a new controller that's E-rated. Wireless access points need to be upgraded except for the library. We need a controller, which is about $755. And we've had to purchase new items as new, requirements popped up for remote learning, like webcams, document cameras, et cetera. So that's what that line is for.
only $1,000 to get all that?
That's what he asked for, so.
I don't know what any of that is, but okay. Nate?
Library furniture phase 1 shows up in 2 different lines.
Yeah, that's because some of it is new and some of it's replaced. So
Right,
there might be
this-
something new they don't currently have, but then some of the things they currently have might need to be replaced, or do need to be replaced. So it needs to show up in different lines because whether it's new or replaced.
It doesn't have to be specific to the library, but the library is sort of on my mind because it was in one of the correspondence items that we received. One of the letters mentioned what's going on in the library in a very positive way. I wonder whether, and I'm not committed to library exactly, but I wonder whether over the next couple weeks, as we sort of work through this, would it be possible to ask maybe somebody to come in and talk about what, how the library is going and how in this sort of coronavirus, situation, like, could we, maybe it doesn't have to be the library, but maybe some teacher or something, would somebody feel comfortable coming in to talk to us about, I liked putting $13,000 into the library, but it would be, something like that would be, if we're going to the voters and if we're trying not to get a default, could we have some sort of a presentation about how it's going and what it would be used for and something like that. Again, I'm not committed to the library, but something like that might help us. Maybe the NBC conversation, I don't know.
I think Beth would be delighted to come to a board meeting and explain her. She's working her tail off like everyone else and put a lot of other things together and been recognized on podcasts recently, so I think that and I think she has a great plan for the library, so I'm sure she'd be happy to come talk to you about it.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
No.
Thank you.
Computer replacement on line 100, that is the replacement cycle that they have each year. On line 106, that is the special ed teachers, so a lot of that, there's some of those numbers move around just for staffing, but as well as there was an increase in the contract last fiscal year, that made it on the warrant for this last fiscal year. Current fiscal year. There is a reduction on line 109 of paraprofessionals, and that's because we're going from 32 paras to 28.
Is that something that we're just having staffing shortage, or we just don't need 32 pairs anymore?
They're student specific, so Lisa McConnell has worked with her case managers, they've worked with the caseload, with the special ed secretary, and they've worked out all of the numbers. Of course, you just never know who's gonna walk through your door, but we adjust accordingly.
Okay.
Yeah, and so when it comes to like the special education lines, those are driven by student needs, and it's not something that the boards typically interject into because, we're required to fulfill the students' IEPs and whatever's called for in the IEPs.
Yeah, and
Cliff Notes version.
we have to give, we are unable to provide detail, just because it is student specific, so we have to be very careful, because even though it may be a large number, it could be a small population that it's funding, and so it could easily point out who those students are.
Gotcha.
So, for those of you that are new to this, just keep that in mind if you're discussing budgetary things. We speak at kind of a certain altitude when it comes to the specialist stuff.
It is based off of current loads that we have, but also what we know is going to potentially happen next year. So these numbers, we work with the assistant superintendent as well as Lisa, so they work together and come up with the numbers they believe they're going to need for next year. So you just do see some increases in line 122 and 130, that is contracted services as well as special placements, and those are because of change of services. Co-curriculars 151 is going down, and the reason for that was, I believe you were not running a couple clubs, is it? I guess I don't have to know, I thought I did. Do you know why it was going down? I have, it's in here, it's just not, there's no note of why it's less this year than, next year than it is this year.
I think we have looked at, 5,000 less.
Well, I wonder, I wish I had brought the budget from last year, because I wonder if you proposed less last year, but you ended up in default, so you got the same number as the previous year.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I believe, we had zeroed out the after-school program, the
That is
after-school
right,
program.
yes. That is a big piece of it.
Yeah.
Yep,
Which was $5,000.
yep, okay, yep, and I do have a zero in that line, that's on blue on page 33.
I'm sorry, what number was that?
Page
Oh,
33?
in the breakdown.
Yep, in the breakdown, yep.
And so we zeroed that line.
We've zeroed out just the after-school program, there's zero money in there, it's bright blue.
Okay, now, that line being zero, does it close it here, or does it have to be closed on the primary budget?
No, we just, when we counted for the 33,136, we didn't include anything in there, so that 33,130,
This doesn't act as a closed line in
No.
this budget?
no, it's just in your detailed sheet so that you could see what we normally fund there, but they chose not to fund it this year, or for next year.
I guess what I'm getting at is, should we put $1 in that line?
No, it's not gonna do anything, nope. The only lines we need to put $1 in are the actual ones
In the
within the budget,
budget.
yep. And that's just so, for those that are new to the budget, the reason why there are some lines that you see $1 in is because if we put 0 in there, and then something, an expense occurs, we cannot utilize the line. The only way we can utilize the line is if it stays open, so we keep it open with $1. On co-curricular equipment on line 161, we're requesting some netting for soccer goals, 3 locker room benches, some replacement of baseball bleachers. Again, that's all broken down on the pages 134 and 135 for the co-curriculars.
And, do we actually have a locker room that's being used now? Not for storage, but for actually, like, locker room?
Can it be?
It can't, we are getting to that point.
That's the goal.
That's the goal, yes.
So if it's not storage, then we need benches to actually use it as a locker room.
Yes.
Yeah. Great, that's exciting.
If this was a normal year, it would look like regular libraries.
Yeah.
But given our situation, we're not sure, so we didn't do anything there.
Also, I believe we broke out that line, the co-curricular equipment line, we broke out from the co-curricular supplies line. We tried to get the budget last year, we had $1 in there to start the new line, so, we were able to specify exactly what we're looking for equipment versus just the supplies that,
And is netting for the goals, $6,000.
The netting will be behind the goals, not actual for the goals, it's for like behind, so the ball don't constantly go over the fence.
That's not $6,000, cause there's other items too.
Yeah, the total one
There's
is,
locker room benches, replacing
Oh,
the
Yeah,
baseball
oh, yeah, I'm
bleachers.
sorry, yeah, but that's what the netting is. The
Okay.
netting is essentially like, kinda like a driving range, that type
Yeah,
of netting.
tax, that kind of stuff.
So you constantly have kids jumping over the fence, so it's kind of a safety hazard.
Okay, alright, let's 8. Very minimal increases on here. We are asking to increase line 183 by a couple $1,000 for bandit, some additional medical supplies for the nurse. Obviously, PPE costs, now that it's an unknown on how long this pandemic's gonna last, so we really need to be sure that we have some money in there in case this continues. Page 9, the increase, there's one new line, and that is line 238. We are requesting to add a new line for staff training, and we're asking for 4,000 there. I don't know if you wanna elaborate on why we're adding that?
so that, in the past 2 years, we didn't go last year, but the year before, we had a group of middle school teachers go to the NELMS conference. You had approved of hotel and also travel expenses, so, we would like to break out that line and use it, maybe 1 year use it for NELMS. Our reading specialists would love to bring a crew to the Lucy Calkins training or some other kind of literacy training, so maybe the following year we'll, give the money to that particular, but I think if we break out that line specifically out of the contractual amount for teachers, going to conferences and taking workshops and, courses, and we make it very specific to what the school is looking to do, $4,000 would definitely cover a group of teachers going, including, travel expenses.
The next section is the school board section on page 10, lines 245 to 260. This section's actually most of it's going down. There are a couple lines that have increased, and those are the 2 bottom ones, which are 259 and 260. 259 is for auditors. I currently, I have an RFP that I'm in the process of. We have received the proposals back, but I just honestly haven't had time to review them. But I am in the middle of doing that, so we will have a new auditor. We will actually have a new auditor for this fiscal year as well that we did not anticipate, but we're carrying the expense into next year as well. Because it's an unknown of what that is, I did increase that line. One of the reasons why I increased it and didn't decrease it is because our current auditor, or the auditor that we have been working with the last few years, they submitted a proposal before we brought them on, that each of the districts will all bill the exact same amount, which honestly I was surprised at because they're all different sizes. I cannot imagine that another firm is going to do the same thing. I would make the assumption that each school district would be a different amount because you're all different sizes with different, you're just different. So with that said, I have an increase for that. That could go up or that could go down. I will know that number, hopefully by the next meeting or the next time we give a budget, but definitely before we go before, the MDC. So that number potentially could change on line 259.
Quick question for you.
Yes.
So under attorneys,
Yep. That's the next one, yeah?
yeah, how,
Is that an anomaly, or is that a pattern over the last few years?
For the, you looking at the actual?
Actual from out, yeah.
Yes, that is real. We've had,
That's actual, you would say?
that's actual, that's actually what happened. We had some, investigations that, I don't know how much I can talk about it.
But it's not in terms of a pattern over the last few years that it is
There were
it is
certain
worth increasing.
situations going on last year that we needed legal representation for.
Sometimes we incur additional.
Right. So just increasing the budget is just a good
Is
move. is
because
what
of
it
that.
is.
And so while we don't have the same, situations going on as last year, we do believe that some of that will be carried forward moving forward. So we need to anticipate budgeting extra to, I'm sorry, I'm being so.
No, that's fine.
I have to be
Did
careful.
they say if they thought that would, the additional increase would cover it, or?
Yes, well, I'm the one that came up with the number, but in speaking with the people that I needed to speak with, they, some of those cases have dropped off, but some are gonna carry forward, so we think, and we're anticipating that should be enough. It could be more, it could be less, I mean, it really all depends on what comes to
I
fruition.
mean, at minimum, is it possible to get like 3 years of actuals, just so we can see if that,
I can certainly do that, but I don't think it's going to help you.
okay?
Just because of situations we've been in, not us, but,
So we're basically just setting aside additional funds in case something happens, that we don't then have to pull funds from another place.
yeah.
Either way, the attorney gets paid.
Either way, the attorney gets paid, right?
I mean,
Maybe we can talk more about it in non-public.
Sure. Let's do that. Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Kind of fun watching this film.
I was getting a little hot, I'm not gonna lie, especially with this mask on.
Oh,
I'm
boy,
sorry.
no.
Okay, so the next line is 265, which is district share. So that is the breakdown of that is the district assessment I talked about earlier, which is on page 42. That has to do with the SAU budget. What I will say is, a line of this increase, a lot of it has to do with the fact that your equalized valuation went up drastically. So if you look on line 42, you would see that this current year is 601,000, and next year it's
sorry, you said 42?
Yes, page 42 is going up to 728. So that equalized evaluation is a lot larger. That I get from the Department of Ed.
So, for the new members, can you just explain, how that equalized valuation works in relation to, it's based off of the town's net or gross assessment overall, correct?
I believe so.
So,
Coming from the state.
yeah, the state puts a value on
Yes.
the town.
And it's
Says
a
our-
year behind. There's like a year lag on it as well.
Right. And then that's where, part of where our percentages come from.
Right, and then it takes a look at what your pupils are, and then they combine that percentage, to come up with the percentage of what your district share would be. And then it takes the SAU budget, that has not been finalized. We will finalize that next Wednesday, or this upcoming Wednesday, a week from now. So that number potentially could change, should the full board decide to make any changes at that point.
Is that calculation part of the AREA agreement, just out of curiosity? Where did that calculation come from?
The calculation of,
To come at our final, what percentage we owe?
no, no. It's combined, the combined percentage of
Yeah,
your
okay.
pupils and your valuation, so no.
Okay.
It's not with the area agreement, because you're not part of the area agreement.
No, I know, that's the question. I was just, how do they come up with that particular calculation? But I get, if you should just look at percents across the board, that's fine.
I will find out where it originated from. This
It's not
has
that big.
been here long before me.
That's not that big.
But I should know the answer to that, so I will get the answer to it. The reason why I say that is I'm not a person like to say, well, that's because we've always done it. That like is nails on the chalkboard,
Yeah.
so.
And that becomes a contractual cost of the district. So, once the SAU board passes that SAU budget, that dollar amount is the dollar amount that we are paying the SAU regardless of default, not default, that varies through both budgets. And just becomes, it's basically, it's our budget.
So, to understand it, so in a district of 5 towns,
Mhm.
we're funding 27% of that district.
Of our SAU budget. So the
So-
SAU budget's at the
Correct.
bottom. Yep, so you're the
Mhm.
22.3% of that.
All things being equal, we would be 20%, we're picking up 27%.
Well, if you look at how many kids are being educated and served by the people, et cetera, you know, that's why it gets broken down the way it does. It's not just we're not just 1/5 of the load of the services that the SAU provides.
And the other thing that's not calculated into that is also services the SAU pay for it on an as-needed basis.
Correct,
So that is
Such
separate.
as,
correct, so that when at the full SAU board meeting,
Yep.
we went over Fund 1, but we also went over Fund 2, Fund 4, Fund 5, and Fund 7.
Here's an example, is
And this
PACE.
is Fund 1.
And
PACE
this is Fund 1.
PACE is an alternative school that the SAU runs. We have sent students there in the past. We're not sending any students there this year, so we're not paying anything for PACE.
Correct.
Other districts who are using this service will be paying for that. We're not paying for that.
Only, in those particular lines, you're only billed for actual people utilizing services.
That's got to calculate out.
we have 17% of the students in the district, so less than 20%.
We have, yes, but the town's value is higher than some of the other towns.
That's right.
So this is where the state goes in and
Yeah.
says,
Sure.
hello, I hate to use the term wealthier town, because I don't think you're a really wealthy town by any means, but hello, wealthier town, you get to put more in the bill. Have a nice day.
Yeah, I mean, because if you look, I mean, there are other districts where their student population has gone down, but their valuation went up, and so their district share was less. Whereas you had a couple students decrease, but nothing drastic, so your valuation really played a huge role in it.
The other thing that I've also never taken the time to try to back into this is how our high school students impact. Because our high school students aren't taken into account, people come with it. It's another 200 kids. That, yes, you still has some involvement with, not to the same extent, but
Yeah.
we're not showing 200 students that are
Yeah, this is just
Deerfield
K through
students.
8.
Where if you're looking at Pembroke's numbers, you're seeing K through 12. So this is part of where it gets, again,
Little
there's
convoluted.
variables.
I would be curious, are we paying for some of our high school kids, both to RSAU and to Concord? That would be an interesting
But
question.
Concord's a tuition though, right? So I mean,
Right.
that's just a,
No, I know, just in a larger sense, we are paying the tuition to Concord, but are we also paying for high school services from our SAU? If you were to break out our, like, what are we paying for? Are we paying for some high school services at our SAU, even though we don't send any kids there?
well, at minimum, we're receiving some services, right? We're receiving efforts from the SAU in preparation of, or for, on behalf of our high school students.
Yeah.
Like for special ed, they bill those out separately. So we.
We don't pay
see-
Concord for that.
We pay Concord for it, but it's broken out separately, so it's not within this district assessment.
But you didn't think we were gonna go there, did you?
You can go anywhere you like. That's why I'm here.
All right.
Okay. Let's see here. On line 280, secretary salary, there's an increase on that line. The reason being is there was some shift in the way they changed the positions within that unit. Is that the best way to say that? And so because of that, I think we made an individual gave them more hours. So that played a role, but that amount didn't make it into the default because it wasn't budgeted the previous year. So carrying forward,
Yeah, the increase over the actual is not that high.
no. And you gotta also take into consider what the regular raises, increases that you gave last year too, so that plays a role too. Let's see, we're on line 289, there's a large increase there. That has to do with the, we call it our umbrella billing. It's basically, these softwares that we utilize are mostly SAU-wide. Some districts in particular might use something that another district doesn't, but we only bill per pupils for these particular softwares. There's been an increase with this. Some of it has to do with price increases. Some of it has to do with we're simply needing to utilize additional programs because of remote learning and hybrid learning. So that is some of the domino effect that's kind of coming into next year. This is going to obviously hit our budget for this year. So we're probably gonna run into some problems in that line because we've already had started utilizing some of these programs. Is there anything else you wanna say about that, Kristen?
No, that sums it up.
On line 297, that is trying to remember what that one was. That's contractual. I need to put the word contractual in there.
What line are you?
That's 297, that's the travel and conferences,
Yeah.
so that would have been from contracts, so I just need to put that. Then I need to highlight that purple.
Is that different than the Nelly conference? What conference are we talking about?
It's not a particular conference per se, but in the contracts, they are allotted a certain amount of dollars for conferences or travel.
I think it's administration.
Yes. And so, I just didn't designate that note in there, so I need to do that.
Okay. So we did add, or there is in the budget 4,000 earlier for additional teacher PD. This is for additional administration.
This is administration, yep.
Okay.
Okay, the next section is operational maintenance, which is on page 12, line 810. And really the increases that are happening here are on line 331 and 335, and that's in ground maintenance and equipment repairs. Those are broken out in Appendix D, which is on page 37. So some of the increases for line 331 are, let's see here, so we're in the middle of a 3-year contract for our lawn maintenance, the sinkhole maintenance. We need to do some line stripping / crack sealing, and we have $4,000 for parking lot maintenance. On line 335, which is contracted services, we have, those are like our Casella waste, septic, fire protection, hood suppression, pest control. We have some gym floor restoration. That's the varnish that needs to be put on there. We also have, let me make sure I'm looking at the right line. I am. Let's see here. One of the other things is the fire alarm inspection. That's gone up a little bit, a good amount actually. They're budgeting $2,000 for that line. We have snow removal in here, so that's the same as before, but we really don't know what that amount's going to be until we get the contract. And working on full scope for painting upstairs. So there's some painting on the upstairs hallways to match the work that was done in the spring. And there's an increase in a reliable H&D, Aqua Spec, so a couple of our vendors, there's also some pretty drastic increase. $6,400 for increases.
I will say that, our new facilities director, did call around and this was, in the past, the numbers have been, I think that went up a little bit, but I'm not sure exactly how much, but, Mr. Kokas actually called and spoke to people, and these are actual numbers so you haven't, you might not have seen it increase as much in the past, but, this is because he was very thorough in his work, and so the numbers that are here will most likely align with the numbers that he will spend.
Can I ask about Appendix B, sort of in the middle of the first page, grounds maintenance? The number went up in our main budget line 331. It says it went up 19,000. I'm not seeing that like the numbers don't line up with line 331. I see the second number is 49,350, and that lines up. But the first number is not the same, and I'm curious where that 19,000 increase came from because it
I think
was.
that's on the second page, I think that's the overall increase.
That's the overall increase, yeah.
So that includes the additional, there's $10,000 of additional paint work there, there's.
But isn't that contracted services? Isn't that line 330? Isn't that line 335? Or am I not, am I
Nope,
misreading
so
this?
331 is we're budgeting 49,350.
Yeah,
So if you look on page 37, right in the middle,
yeah,
you're gonna notice that 2021 isn't the same,
right,
and that's not the same because we ended in default. So there were some things that were budgeted, they wouldn't have moved forward. Is that your question, Nate, or were you
Yeah.
talking about this next
Maybe.
year?
oh, I see, okay, yeah, I think I,
If there was another account for default, you'd see that.
gotcha, okay, that's what I
Yeah,
was gonna say,
so
yes,
there are some
alright,
things
thank
that
you.
automatically do not make it in because it was something new being proposed. It wasn't something that has been ongoing, that's contractual with
Okay.
vendors.
Alright, thanks.
Does that make sense?
Yes, I get that.
Okay. All right, so moving on to the next section, which is transportation. We are in the last year of our contract for next year. In the 2021 is the final year of the contract, as I said earlier. The RFP will be going out, to cover 22, 23 years and forward. There are 3 buses noted here, in line 340. The high schools, we are busing, we are notating for 3 buses, that's how much the amount would be. For line 343, I budgeted for 7 buses. Our contract does allow us to do 8 buses. The last several years, we've only allotted to do 7 buses. I did put a note in here what it would cost if, on line 345, if we should choose to use 8 buses instead of 7. So right now, if we were to use 7 buses, it would cost us $433,755. If we were to go with 8 buses, it'd be $495,720. Just as a,
So, the question I have is, going into this, as we look at putting it out to bid, and 8 buses and all that, I know this year, obviously, we have issues, whatever, but the year before, Dale came to us with issues, and there was a whole uproar right before school started. That's all I have for background into it, but has this been a recurring issue with Dale, where we should tell them we need 9 buses, anticipating that we get?
Well, they can't
Or if you
provide,
look
they
at
can't provide
one
7
of those
buses.
for-
So, right, but what I'm saying, we're going out to bid, right, and hopefully we don't get Dale back as a vendor.
Well, but that bid, we're looking at right now, the bid would be for the
22, 23.
23, not 21, 22.
So next year is gonna be the same vendor.
So currently, we're 4 of 5, next year is year 5 of 5.
Gotcha, so it doesn't matter with Dale.
Right.
Unless we pull the contract.
And potentially, it's not necessarily Dale. I mean,
Oh, no, it's
they
definitely
got-
Dale, they're
it
providing.
is. Well, let me rephrase. Potentially, if they had less districts, maybe they could provide more buses.
Sure, there's a bus shortage.
But
I solved the problem earlier, it's $50 an hour.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's like-
I
mean, I've
trust,
seen it
I
work
have
on
many
buses.
suggestions too, but,
Nate?
anyways.
Could we, Amber, so the next time we look at this line, just out of curiosity, would it be possible to get a current, we've only been using a fraction of the buses that we had budgeted for. So, you know, if we're only using 2 to the high school right now, or 1.5 to the high school, we're using 5 or 6 for our, you know, if you were to take that current rate that we are, and I assume we're paying less on a monthly basis to Dale because of that, if we were to sort of project that out for the rest of the year, what kind of savings on this year will we be seeing because of less bus utilization?
We've received 1 invoice from them at this point. Right now, we are utilizing the buses, all of the buses that we're supposed to be utilizing. And so,
So we're getting a full bill for what
I
they're
believe
providing
the
us?
last bill was a full bill because they were providing all the buses we needed at that time.
Okay,
But with that said, I have other districts that they have not. And so what has happened, and they have double runs. And so what's happened is they are crediting us back for whatever buses we're not using, and then they're billing, I think it was $90 a day, for any extra runs. So there is some pretty substantial credit. It would be very difficult for me to estimate what that would be until I know
okay.
what they're not gonna be able to provide. But certainly, once I start getting that data in, as the months go on, I certainly can give you that information.
Okay.
We are short a high school bus. We're running
Yeah, we had
So-
budgeted 3, and we're running 1.5
So
right now.
there should be a high school bus when I,
But we were also, right, and so we were also utilizing one bus to, for CRTC too. So that bus is one of the buses that. I believe
I'm gonna
it
say in
works
my
out.
head, I don't think there's 10 buses running for us on a daily basis.
No, maybe,
In
I
my
don't
head,
know,
I
I'd have to
think there's-
relook,
Doesn't
but
seem to add up.
when I looked at the invoice last time, it did look
Would you
accurate, but I
dig a
will,
little deeper into that for us?
sure. I have been asking multiple times if we're running all of our buses and they're starting to get this yet, so I will look again.
If I was a betting man and I was spending with Jeff's money, I'd bet we were only running 9 buses.
So I guess the other
Or
point
not.
is, if we, because we want 2 buses running for high school, right? And if we're making the sacrifice, but we're not getting a discount because
Well,
we should at least be hitting them for the $500 a day liquidated damages, in my opinion. If they're not able to provide us what we want, and I know this is off topic, but
well, it's not necessarily, like, I mean, if they have to provide us the busing. If we move a bus around from here to there, it's not that they're not providing the service.
if our kids are getting off the bus in Bearbrook State Park to get on another bus, they're failing to deliver the product. Like, we're sacrificing at that point, and they should be
We're
financially
making
helped.
accommodations,
Yes.
right? So we're making accommodations to try to fix one problem with another. I think what we really need to look at is definitively, because again, I'm gambling with Jeff's money right now. We're only getting 9 buses, and I don't think we've gotten 10 buses at all.
I'm not disagreeing with you, and I'm not saying I'm happy with what's happening. I think the other thing we have to take into consideration is because of CDC guidelines, they can't effectively run the full buses that they're supposed to because we are limited to students.
But that doesn't impact quantity of buses. So our contract is 10 buses,
Yeah.
right?
And I think because we're using a Concord bus and a Northwood bus.
We're facilitating a flop and twitch
Right.
in an effort to satisfy what we need for the elementary
Right.
schools, because otherwise, if we send 3 buses to Concord, we only have 6 running for DCS.
Right.
That doesn't work.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
we've stolen a Concord bus
Mhm.
to satisfy DCS demand, right? But at the end of the day, our contract is, we always say
It's
7
10
buses,
buses.
it's 10 buses.
It's
Our
10.
contract is 10 buses,
Mhm.
and so I think we need to definitively know, on any given day, do we have 10 buses operating?
Yep.
Or do we have 9 buses operating? And if we've only had 9 buses operating, we have facilitated a flop and twitch and we've made
Yep.
accommodations, but somewhere along the lines, I don't want you paying for the 10th bus that doesn't have a driver that isn't moving.
We will not.
Okay, so
I-
that's what we're trying to
I
say.
promise you that that will not happen. I've been reviewing these invoices. In fact, I sent them all back to be reviewed because there were things on them that I didn't read.
Okay.
So I am reviewing them. They always have been sent to me before they're paid, not even just this year, but every year they get sent to me. They get put in my mailbox, I review them. So I'm reviewing them before they're being paid. So if I'm finding something that doesn't align, it is being changed.
All right, I most certainly think we collectively as a board are very interested in making sure that we are not paying for
Yeah, absolutely.
anything that's not
Phantom bus.
going.
And nor should you be 100%. And I don't disagree with Jeff either.
Mystery machine.
They're potentially, we have to have the conversation about if they're not providing, what do we do about it?
I think we're probably much closer to that point than maybe you anticipate us being.
No, I
Based
think
on
I'm
what
on the
the
same,
conversation just had.
page.
You there with us?
I think I'm there.
Okay, all right. Sorry.
Okay,
Continue.
onward. All right, so those are the increases there. Let's see what we got going on there. Field trips. Oh,
Sorry.
Yes,
quick
sure.
question. So based on what we were just talking about, so I've got 7 buses and then, 8 bus line item. So if we're at 10 now, I guess why are we budgeting for less buses? Or we just,
We are
High
not.
schools.
We actually have
Okay.
11. We actually have 11 buses in our contract, but we're only utilizing 10, and we've only budgeted for 10.
okay.
I put this in here in case for some reason the board, every year it's a conversation, do we add another bus? Do we have, are our buses too full at one point, or several points of time? Our buses were getting, the utilization on some buses was very high, and so there was discussion on whether we should add another bus in there, which
Bus route,
technically
that's why the bus route
is
budget.
part of the contract, so if we said tomorrow we need another bus, let's put the the other situation out of the way. If all the buses were, we weren't in the situation we're in now, and we said we need another bus, technically they're supposed to provide us another bus because that is in their proposal. I know, just to add to the
Anything when I'm
swirl.
thinking.
Yeah.
So we've always had this conversation. There have been years where we put the extra bus in and then
We
we
took
took
it
it
out
out.
anyway, so.
Obviously it's a pretty substantial increase to the admin, but I wanted the information to be in here so you could make a,
Add on if you want.
yes. Okay, line 350 field trips, we've added 10,000 for the 6th grade science camp.
Yeah, we tried to do that for
We
the
did.
year, yep, and,
Yeah, got cut.
so.
Yeah.
And then the increase, there's also an increase in athletic trips, to account for the volleyball team, they go further, to play their games, and Trish was so bossy about this, so. But no, as you can see, our actual for 1920, we barely made it, you know, we barely made them 5,200, so.
And that was, again,
And that-
pulling the plug
and
on March 15th.
Correct, so we would have gone over, we had to continue.
Spring sports never occurred.
Right.
Correct, yeah, baseball, softball, and track.
So we actually didn't make it in all fairness.
We definitely wouldn't have,
Which
and
we would
so we're
force
accounting for
us, but-
volleyball,
So
per
then,
request.
so then is the 1250 sufficient? Or?
The total of 1250 in that line?
The additional
An
12.
additional,
Yes.
So that's three additional sports.
No, just one additional.
volleyball is the one additional sport that we hadn't accounted for in the past, and their games are usually a little further than, they're not just local, Chichester, I'm not in the district, I'm local, so they go a little further. Like, yeah, like Rochester and Dover.
I don't know, Farmington.
Yeah.
Portsmouth.
Farmington.
Yeah, they play here.
All right, the next section is other services that include the fringe benefits. So health insurance. Right now, we have an estimate in here because I will not receive, that amount of what the increase will be until around November 10th. That's around the first to second week of November is when I receive that. With that said, I've had conversations with school care and they do anticipate a increase, and they said a single digit increase, which doesn't really help me. But they did say something around 7%. I went 8 with Deerfield, and the reason why is because when each year when the rates come in, Deerfield is always higher than the other district. It is based on utilization, and so I went 8 with an estimated. Now it could go up and that could go down. I'll know in a couple weeks.
Your, mathematically, was there some plan changes?
There are plan changes, correct? Not only are there plan changes, but there's personnel changes. So you could have somebody that was a family plan that left and now is either not electing medical or is, went from a family plan to a single plan. So that also plays a role. It's not just whether there's an increase, but it's plan changes.
And
The staff members that we know are potentially having children, I guess, are we budgeting from them if they're currently single to be in a family plan?
Well, they would have been, many of them in the family plan already, if they're,
I don't know how I don't know that I would know that because
Or the
they
DCS
could be a family already.
But if they're not, that would be a significant change in the plan.
Yep, it could go from a 2-person to a family.
Is that something that if you're provided enough information, you can budget for?
I can budget for whatever.
Could we?
I don't know if I could, I don't know how much it becomes personal information, I don't know.
Well, it's just numbers, I think, right?
Yeah.
Number of family.
So like, if you know that a couple, I'm in trouble, I'm
Oh,
ready.
she came on, see?
No, it's definitely personal.
Yeah, it was just.
We're done talking about it.
She's making me sweat in here, Patty.
That was good.
Alright, we're moving on.
Alright, but,
Bye, Patty.
but the difference between the default and the proposed is that there's a proposed staff member that wouldn't be there for the default.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep, so you'll notice that the default is lower, and that is because there are positions that would not make it into that budget, so therefore those benefits would also come out.
Probably safe that, but, yeah.
Okay, so So, the other big one that, is drastic, and we've had this conversation at the full SAU board, but we're gonna have it again. Retirement. So New Hampshire retirement, the state is increasing New Hampshire retirement for next year, not this fiscal year, but next year. Non-certified is going up from 11.17 to 1406. And the teacher retirement is going up from 17.8 to 21.02, which is huge. So not only do you have the retirement increases off of any salary increases that may have occurred or personnel changes that may have occurred, you also have the rate increase from the state. So that's all playing a role in that line.
Is there gonna be a dental increase, or? is
There,
that
right
zero?
now, there's no dental increase. So that is the same, your number is going down, but again, that's because of plan
Is
changes.
that definitively there won't be an increase,
There
or is that
is.
still subject to?
That is no increases,
Okay.
definitively.
That's good news.
The same here, carrier for dental is our life insurance and long-term disability. We have that same vendor. They are also not proposing, any increases for life or long-term disability either. So any changes you're seeing there again are personnel changes. Annuities, that is going up, and to be honest, because I like to be honest, there was a miss on that last, or for this current year. It shows 12,000. It should be more for this current year, so we're gonna have a problem this year on this line. There were only certain individuals that were taken into account, and there should have been other individuals that fell into that line, and they were not. So, that is an error that I will take ownership for, and it is corrected moving forward.
Okay.
That's what it is.
All right, so line 3086, which is your transfer to food service. Your budget for your food service is on page 44. If you flip to 44, because it might be easier for you to see it, you're gonna notice where the change is. So, actually, your food service isn't as drastic as some of the other districts, quite honestly. Some of the big changes we're seeing are the revenue pieces. A lot of you know that, for instance, this year, meals are free to students. We have lost in the last several years, child nutrition for the state. We all of a sudden, the revenue for that is just started dropping off. We're also seeing less in federal funding as well. So that's been taken into consideration. On line 24 is the transfer to general fund. That 25,000 is what you're seeing on line 386 within your budget. So that's the amount it's going to take for this food service program to break even. That's to say, if we get all the revenue in and we expend what we anticipate expending on. We have to subsidize that program, there's no choice. Even if your food service budget had a surplus, we would still have to cover any receivables, which would be unpaid lunches. Your general budget has to cover those things.
And this is more to this year, but where the lunches are being provided this year, is that gonna offset it to the extent where we should be able to break even?
I mean, I believe we're supposed to receive state funding for lunches we're providing. At what extent will those be covered fully, I'm not sure. Is that your question?
Well, I guess that begs another question, which is, it actually now forces me to ask a bunch of questions. So are we invoicing the state for the lunches that are being distributed distributed on a daily basis, or are we?
We provide information to the state on how many lunches are being provided.
Okay. And
Yes.
we are hoping the state's gonna reimburse us?
From the
Or
emails
is
that
this
I've
going
been
to be
reading, we are supposed to be reimbursed for that for them.
Okay.
Now, that's obviously until the state funding runs out.
Okay.
Let's hope it doesn't run out.
Amber, lines, and I'm looking at page 44, lines 18, 19, 20, it looked like, we were expecting more revenue from the federal government than we received.
That's because we went into remote, and so when we went into remote, we had students that were not purchasing lunch. So if they weren't purchasing lunch, then we weren't getting reimbursed after those meals. So we would see, some decline in that. That's the reason. It was because of remote. And it may have been, it also may have been just in general, a decrease in lunches throughout the year as well. But the big point is the spring.
Okay. So our offset for 1920 is actually very,
I mean, to be honest, in comparative to
not bad as it could have been.
not as bad as it could have been. It looks bad because, I don't know, that doesn't look right. I need to check that now.
The 5K.
Yeah, that does not look right.
I remember that being the discussion point last year at the NBC.
Yeah, something's not looking right then. Let me look at that. I don't know why that didn't jump out of me before, but it's jumping out of me now. Other than that, so it's looking like 4.38% increase for your proposed, and your default is 2.6.
And you can really hammer a huge portion of this increase to half a dozen lines that are beyond our basically control, right?
I mean, really, the key things I think to walk away with the increases would be contractual increases through prior voted CBAs. Then we have fringe benefits that have gone to retirement and health, which is not your health, but those could be a driver. And then the second thing, another thing would be there are several expenses that we would have we tried to propose for this current fiscal year that did not make it into this current budget because we ended in default. So we're trying to now play catch up to the items we needed to, for this current year. And then the last point is there are items in here that we didn't need in the past because remote learning wasn't going on, and it is now. And some of those things like software and PPE and things like that, we didn't need previously, and now it's extremely important that the school district has those items.
So, a question I have for you guys, is there items that were left on the table that you would want us to discuss? It's kind of an on-the-spot question, it doesn't have to be today, but I mean, if there's items or initiatives or things that we aren't necessarily funding, what were they, and to what extent was it?
I think the biggest thing was to just get back into the budget what we tried to get in before the default. When we put out the information for our, the people who, each individual, group that does their piece of the budget, I said, we're looking for a bare minimum increase as best you can, but if you need it, let us know. And I think they did a fabulous job narrowing down what they really needed. We wanted to go into, we knew that there would be other increases that we couldn't, there was nothing we could do anything about, so we wanted to go into it with the bare minimum that we could. So I think we got what we wanted back in, and I don't think that there's much more that was on the table that we cut away so that we could give you what.
Okay. Additional questions? Okay.
maybe, it doesn't have to be the next meeting, but, at some point, could we get, I mentioned a sort of a presentation or information earlier about something like the library. I would also be curious to hear more about the proposed teacher position, and maybe, what the current setup of the middle school is, and how that would change with this new proposed position, because
You know what
that's,
he's talking about, the proposed position.
Yeah,
It's math specialist was the position that you requested last year that was in the budget, but got taken out.
Reposition, I guess.
Right, it was, right, because we had a retirement, we had things that we were able to, the numbers actually are the same. We went into this year with the same exact numbers that we had on staff to work with.
We could talk about
yeah,
different
a
FTEs.
little more detail on that would be great.
Yeah, there's
Maybe-
different FTEs.
Okay, thank you.
And so what happens is, so when I went to the training or they changed some items for the default and how it's calculated. So when I went to that new thing, they base it off of FTEs. So you have to go FTE to FTE.
If you had 100 employees, you can have 100
Right.
employees.
So if there were 42 FTEs last year budgeted and it passed, the next year you ask for 43 and the default only carries forward the 42. So we looked at FTEs. So when I went back and compared the budget that was approved roster and what we're asking for next year, I have to compare the FTEs, if that helps.
So it's not
You may
going,
have to you may have done some repositioning, and we can talk about that,
Yeah.
but just so you know where my line of thought process is, it's FTEs. So, the reason why I appoint that position is because that particular position was proposed last year, so that's the one I grayed out, but you may modify to choose to do something different if you repurpose.
Right, I think it actually was the science position that we were, because we had a new science teacher. The math position was, worked out, anyway, we'll have to take.
Yeah, I know, I just went by the notes that were in the budget from last year, so, but we can talk about if that needs to change, we can talk about that, but just so you know, it's gotta be FTE to FTE.
yeah, you guys figure that out and bring it back to us, however it needs to look. Alright, additional questions regarding our current proposed budget?
Could you just redefine contracted services for me?
So contracted services,
For which, the area, because there's a couple of
Yeah,
comments.
there's a lot of
About
them. What
maintenance,
page
or
are you
talking
on?
about?
Well, okay, so the maintenance one, is that just the increase in like the Casella contract, something along those
so
lines?
to sell
Yep.
lawn maintenance, those outside.
Outside contractors. Is that the line, are you talking about line 335?
Yeah.
Alright, so that, if you turn to page 37, it outlines what those are. So, there's some notes on the side, so
Oh, yeah.
you can see what the breakdown for those are. But those are all your vendors or, contracted services we have that are in that line.
They're very specific to things that need to be done in the
Yeah.
building. that
Fire
cannot be done.
inspections.
Right.
To sell a waste, like that kind of stuff.
Is it possible just to add, so like when we have these appendixes, just to kind of complete the circle, to say this is in reference to line 335, and this is in reference
Yeah.
to line 321,
Yeah.
so that
I did that for you on the co-curricular, so I can do that for you
on
on,
the other stuff, and
on
this is
this
more,
one,
it's
yeah.
just, so by the time it goes to the NBC, if we have that all kind of linked together,
yeah,
cleans it up.
sure.
Alright, additional questions regarding the proposed budget? Round one.
Found one.
Anybody, going once, going twice? So, done, okay, moving on. Next up, Amber, thank you, by the way, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Kristen and Brian and Patty, if you hear me, I see a thumbs up, I'm not in trouble, that's good. Let's see, we have the instructional model, the decision-making matrix, and the draft plan for the full reopen, I presume. Authority, this is gonna be, yours, or Brian's? Okay, how about it? This is on the,
Yep, and I have, I only made 5 color copies, so would you be so kind as to not take a color copy?
Oh, yes, I do not. I
I'm colorblind anyway, it's okay.
was gonna say, maybe I'm colorblind anyway. Clearly by my budget, I'm
Yeah,
not.
of course.
Thank you.
You're welcome, and so part of, this, but before we get to that, there's the decision-making matrix that, let me just take a quick look at that.
any questions on the matrix?
No.
No, alright.
Alright, so Mr. Mr. O'Connell and I have, been tasked with coming up with what would we need if we were to return all students into the building? Yes.
Do you mean by, when you say that, do you mean stopping the remote program also, or are you proposing maintaining that?
Well, it's in the
Okay, great,
that, yeah. So this is a plan for a full return, and as you know, every single presentation that I have done, this is not a presentation. This is a plan, to be clear, even though it looks presenting. But I did put in, because I thought you would miss that slide about bringing the community back 7.1.
You said you weren't going to 8.
I know, so we're doing decimals now. And every single presentation starts with, as you know, we do want the kids back in the building, but we need to get them back safely. And right now, every single federal, national, local guidance is still suggesting, or still saying that we need to have the 3 to 6 feet between students and all staff need to be masked. So those are the 2 things that have never changed. Hopefully they will change someday, but we are moving forward with the fact that we still need to keep students and staff 3 to 6 feet apart and masked. So we do want to bring our community back, but we do need to do it safely. And that's always been our standing line, our company line. So what do we need in order to have a full return? Basically, if we bring all students back into the building, our physical distancing will be 3 feet. There's no way that we could do 6 feet in classrooms. The only place that we would be able to do 6 feet is in the cafeteria and the gym, because we would have overflow of lunch in there. We would not be eating lunch in the classrooms anymore, because there's no way we can space kids 6 feet apart. So, as for most guidelines, they do, let me back up for a minute too, if I don't know if anybody's been through the contact tracing process, but contact tracing is anybody you have been with 6 feet apart, masked or unmasked, for a cumulative amount of 10 minutes. So I'm sitting here next to poor Zach, who's gonna be with me for way longer than 10 minutes. We're both masked, and we would both be contact tracing the situation. So I just want people to know that, we have not had to go through, we've had contact tracing happening, but not in our school, within our community, we've had to do that. So, other schools have had to go through that, and that is the guideline that DHHS uses, 6 feet, cumulative 10 minutes, so it could be 3 minutes here, 2 minutes there. So I just wanna make sure that I point that out. So in order to return full, I took a lot of information from the presentation that I did a few weeks ago. Again, we'll go back to staffing. The very first thing we would have to do is hire a couple of long-term subs. We, in our previous presentation, had outlined all of the long-term subs we would need to have in the building, but our top priority would be a 5th grade teacher to replace a teacher who was teaching remotely. We had to collapse a class, and that class would now have to go back into, we could not come back full and keep that class in the current 5th grade classrooms. We would need to hire a long-term sub for 6th grade, they would, if all sixth graders came back, I've said again and again, this is that big bubble class. I think we're up to 67 or 68 students in that class. But even if our remote students did not return, we would still need to hire a sixth grade teacher due to class size, and I'll show you the numbers in a few minutes. We would also need to hire a world language teacher as a long-term sub to replace a teacher that is currently teaching remote, that will most likely stay remote and or not return if we come back full. So then our next priority, but this is, say next priority, meaning they're equally as important, but not to the reopening of the building if we were to come back full. We do have a preschool teacher that is teaching remotely, but our other preschool teacher, as you know, we don't have preschool, and she is being utilized as a case manager for other grade levels. We're very fortunate to have her help us out in that regard. We will be looking for a long-term sub-case manager. We will be looking to replace our reading interventionist, who is currently teaching remotely. We also might have some paraprofessionals that do not return. They are working, they've not returned this school year, but they might continue to not return, or we might have some that need to leave. So we might have to do some potential paraprofessional hires. And then if we kept the remote piece, we are looking at the art, music, and PE remote teachers for remote students. So, like I said, they're equally as important, but our top priorities for staffing would be a fifth grade teacher, a sixth grade teacher, and a world language teacher, long-term subs. Then we get into our transportation, and as you can see from Kelly's presentation or her plan tonight, that second we would have to have 2 start times. We broke it up into our K to 4 and our 5 to 8. There's implications of that. The very first being that some students would be arriving on that second rotation. Some kids would be getting here at 8:03, and some kids would not be getting here till 8:40. So there's a lot to consider in that big gap of time on that second run. We would be looking at potential supervision for before school and after school if we can't figure out how to do the grade level staggered start and end of the day. We do have staff here that are, couldn't necessarily, we have some staff that could start in a staggered time, but we do have some staff that are here for all students, all grade levels. For example, our guidance counselors, our nurse, we have office staff here, we have our specialists, reading and math specialists, we have our interventionists, related service case managers, we have case managers that cover all grade levels. So we would have to consider some sort of compensation if we are expecting them to be here at the start with our K to 4 group and all the way to the end, if we're doing staggered end of day as well. We would have to combine our 7th and 8th grade IAs. Their IAs are at the end of the day, so we would have to combine them. Right now they're in separate IA classes, 7th grade and 8th grade, which is something that we would have to do if we were to have a staggered end time and a staggered start time. And again, we've brought this up many times, the rerouting of the bus and the car drop off. We have several, we're still averaging about 60-65 cars in the hybrid model. Per cohort, right. So if we doubled that, if parents were, we would be looking, I've mentioned this before, over 100 cars doing drop off in the morning, pick up in the afternoon. We would definitely have to look at a rerouting of cars that are dropping off and picking up and the safety of students in the buses. Tina thinks she's got troubles now. Ha!
Speed bumps.
Mr. Green, do you want to mention anything else about this particular?
No, in talking to a bus driver, we would essentially just do parent drop off in the front and buses in the back. Buses wouldn't be unloaded at the same time. They would kind of stay up on the road, have 2, maybe 3 buses come up, and then do a 3-point turn by the dumpsters, and then go back out, and then the next bus comes in. So
You run the cars around the cul-de-sac.
yes, cars would come all the way down here, and possibly 2 lines. So that would be orchestrated, done well.
So you got a plan.
I have a plan. with tones.
And speed bump. And signs.
Multiple speed bumps.
As I've mentioned a few times, or we've mentioned a few times, you would need to continue to use all of our available space. So right now, we have a lot of our case managers that are in office spaces that don't have a window, or shared space that's too small for two people to maintain plus bring kids into. So we've had to have our related service folks spread out throughout the building. We've had to have our case managers spread out throughout the building. We're currently using our cafeteria as a space for students to come and work in a small group. So all of our folks that are scattered throughout the building would have to leave the cafeteria. Our IAs would be staying on carts. We would have to transition our gym into a lunchroom space. So our students would have PE in the classrooms as we're getting into the colder weather. Mr. OS is very brave and gets kids out as often as possible. But with the colder weather coming, we're not sure how much longer that can be. So we can push it for as long as possible, but there is a chance that PE would be happening in classrooms. There's little wiggle room for lunch. Lunch, because kids are unmasked during lunchtime, that 6-foot distance becomes pretty important. And we did talk about the fact that snack time might be a problem as well. So as we utilize this space for lunch rooms, we might have to utilize that space for snack as well, because kids obviously are masked for snack as well. When we've already talked, Mr. Grieve and I have been into the gym, we've measured it out. We basically, in the cafeteria, we can fit 27 6 to 8 foot tables and have kids, there's probably 2 kids per table, spaced out throughout the cafeteria. And then in the gym, that's where we put the round tables. Of course, we'd have to put the mats down, and they would be staying down for the entire time. We would have about 20 round tables in the gym, and we would need at least 2 long rectangular tables, which we already have, and then about 5 6 to 8 foot tables. So that's the breakdown of what we would need for cafeteria in order to have 2 grade levels. So we could have first grade in the cafeteria, second grade, or kindergarten and first grade in the gym, or second grade in the cafeteria, third grade in the gym. So we'd be doing 2 grade levels staggered a little bit so that they can complete one group and then bring the next group in. Right now, as you know, lunch is in the classrooms. It's being delivered by cart. Everything is to go. The cafeteria is doing an amazing job. The people who are on lunch duty you hear that cart come in, and you're just careful when you open the doors, because you can hear it rumbling down the hall. And then they bring it back and they get it ready for the next crew. It is seamless here during lunchtime. But we would not be able to continue with that if we were to come back. World language classroom would need to be used for our 6th grade classroom, and world language would go on a cart as well. Any questions about any of that, or Mr. Green has anything you want to add?
No. Yeah, well, in order to get, if we were to only use the cafeteria, we'd have to start lunch at 8:40 in order. And it would go
Well,
until.
kids aren't here yet.
They're just getting off the bus.
They go right to lunch.
We call that
I
brunch.
was gonna say, they call that brunch, right?
It's called brunch.
And then the last one would be at, I think I calculated out, it'd be like a 1:40 lunch.
So, in that regard, there's no way to use the cafeteria and some of the classroom space for grade level, and whether it's a stage or something else to try to allow the gym to still be able to utilize for gym?
Correct. Piece of that puzzle is too, is in the coverage you need. So, if you have half your class in, going from having 1 lunch monitor to now 2 lunch monitors, and we barely make it work on a yearly coverage as it is. So, and a piece of this too is, by keeping it like this, you limit the interactions between grade levels. So all the first grade kids are now exposed to each other, so if something were to happen with with contact tracing, it would only affect first grade, and when you start mixing the grade levels, now you're.
So you'd have A grade in the cat, and A grade in the nation.
Correct. Yeah.
Anything else? So, just to recap some other things, we are currently looking at an enrollment in our K to 5 remote, portion of the program. Our K1, we currently have 18 students working remotely. Second, third, we're at 15, and fourth and fifth, we're at 17, and I bring this up because if we do come back full, we will have those families that will not want their students to come back full, and so will want to take their opportunity to work to go remote. I don't know what those numbers are, but I am saying, and at the same time, if we come back full, I know for a fact that we do have some students who are working remotely that will come back. So it might balance itself out, but I think we need to start looking at capping our remote student enrollment K to 5 at 20. I don't think to ask our remote teachers to teach more than that is the Deerfield way, so we would be looking to put that into place. And like I said, it might work itself out. We might have, for as many students as would want to pivot to remote, we'll have an equal number of students who will want to come back. But like I said, we don't have those numbers at all, so it's hard to predict. I know we're working in the age of not being able of working with that kind of thing, where you just don't know what's going to happen, and you just got to try your best to make the best decision you can with the information you have. Mr. Reynolds.
So when you say cap for K to 5 at 20, you're talking 20 total or 20 per?
20
you currently have
total.
3 teachers.
Yeah, so 60 remote kids.
So for K1, there's a space for 2 more kids,
Okay.
whether it's a kindergarten kid or a first grade kid, I don't know.
Okay, that's what, okay. Alright, so it's still 60 kids, we're not reducing the staff.
No. So 20 kids per grade, per combination grade level.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can clarify that. Before I put this in the draft. As you know, our math and reading specialists for both our K to 3 as well as our 4 through 8 are working to support remote instruction right now. Especially at the K to 3 level, our math specialists and reading specialists are heavily involved in supporting those teachers. So if we do come back full, we will need to have, that support would have to, if not stop, it would definitely be drastically cut. Because our students move back in the building, we would need to utilize, right now they're able to do the intervention groups because of the small cohorts as well as teach remotely. But if we were to come back full, that remote piece would come off of their plate and they would go back into supporting students in an intervention model at this. In the classrooms for both, like I said, for K through 8, both our grade levels are heavily. We are looking to discontinue remote learning for 6th through 8th grade. There is no way that our middle school can maintain coming back full as well as the remote option. Our 6th through 8th grade students would either have to return to school, access VLAX, or home education, be homeschooled. Mr. Grieve was able to get in touch with somebody from VLAX. He has an update on that.
Yeah, so VLAX, while originally they had said that they were granted a substantial amount of money to get their wait list reduced, unfortunately they're not in that position because they're not able to find staff to do that. So after speaking to them, while they have the money, they don't have the staff. So the wait list that they guesstimated would be reduced to almost nothing by now is still almost the same numbers as it was a month ago.
So relax and then another option.
Realize that I'm really not sure now. So, and it doesn't look like it's going to be in the near future. So, well, they have, like I said, they have the money, but we don't have anybody to spend it on. I can't do anything about that.
Kristen?
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be now, this can be afterwards, or if it fits in now. I just have a question on an update regarding the middle school, because last meeting you had said that the middle school teachers are sort of stretched pretty thin as it is, and I understand that in this case we would discontinue it, but at the moment, are you feeling like we should be looking at other options? That was a topic from last meeting. At some point, could you have an update on that?
Yep, I think Mr. Reed and I actually met with both the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teams respectively today, because there stretched to the max. It's very challenging right now. The model, if it were to continue, we would need to talk about another way, whether we go to a 4-day model for middle school. If you needed us, if it were to continue, something would have to change, with the way that it's currently being done. But it is a heavy load for our middle school teachers right now to be teaching hybrid, providing at-home learning assignments, as well as providing remote. They're not just pushing out whatever they're working on in the classroom, it's actually almost completely separate. What they're pushing out remotely is separate from what they're doing in the classroom.
Right. It sounds like a lot. I guess my question, are you arguing that we should vote to take action on that at this meeting, or are you not?
I'm thinking we probably should.
Okay.
Yep.
Is that a different conversation?
How that happens, I don't know exactly, but, we can probably look at it as we review towards the end.
Okay.
What are our enrollment numbers in 6th, 7th, and 8th?
That's next.
Oh.
You're way ahead of yourself, John.
I always am.
In order to maintain the physical distance of 3 feet, we will have to redistribute students in multiple grade levels. So, we've talked about this quite a few times. We're looking at 16 to 18 students per classroom. If we were to have 16 is the ideal number to have for grades K through 8. 16 students back in the classroom can definitely be physically distanced 3 feet. 18 students back in the classroom is really pushing it to the outer limits of the classroom, even if you can fit another row. There are classrooms that kids would not be able to see the instruction that's going on. It's literally out to the edges of the classroom if you were to throw in another couple of students. So we're really stretching it with 18. We would like to maintain 16 potential class moves that would be affected. Again, we've gone over these numbers quite a few times. Those are the current numbers for K to 5 with all students returning except for remote. This does not include remote students returning. So the only grade really, I have a +1 because we had a new second grader move in this week, and so I can't remember which number she falls into. So, but everything, second grade is the only grade pretty much that would be affected, and 5th grade only if we can hire a long-term substitute teacher for that 3rd, 5th grade class.
The 5th grade's currently next to.
Correct, and there's no way we can bring them, but that 13 is the 3rd class. The 13 is now divided, 7 in one classroom and 6 in the other. So we'd be looking at 22 and 20 kids respectively. In the mods, which we know, Mr. Reeves brought you out there and you saw what it looks like. Wall to wall, maybe one more row. Mr. Langlois has his way.
Pump out.
Any questions about those numbers, Mr. Kelly?
None.
Good, okay. So then we go down to our current numbers in 6 through 8. So I broke this down into 2 sections for you. The first column of boxes is what our current numbers would be with only our hybrid students returning full. Our second would be if we did have a return of all of our remote students. As you can see, we're pushing the limits with our 8th grade if all students were to return from remote. We're looking at 19, 19, and 17. If we were to keep 16 as our number to keep kids physically distanced safely, we would definitely, we're pushing the limits there in terms of, we're looking at about 7 kids that would, whether we hire another I don't know how we would handle that.
So I think a question Jeff had asked, and maybe it's buried in here, but how many students in 6, 7, and 8 are remote?
9, 8, and 6.
7, 9, did I miss it?
9 and 6th grade, 8 and 7th, and 6 and 8th.
Did I miss it?
No, you just didn't do the math.
Thank you. I mean, I can get my,
And how many are participating fully right now?
Very few.
20%, 30%?
I think that's high, even that's high.
I would say,
You have one
Okay.
awesome school board member's kid who's rocking it. Not to get personal, but she is.
All right, so
As you said, the return on the investment would
The juice isn't worth the squeeze right now.
exactly.
I think it's the most disheartening piece for our middle school teachers is how hard they're working to get this out. Even our at-home learning students, how hard they're working and the very little return that they're getting. And they're checking in with kids and trying their best and keeping them motivated, and it's pretty challenging.
Part of our conversation last meeting was also about the fact that some of these students will, I imagine, for health reasons, have to stay out.
Mm-hmm.
And if VLAX is not an option, then we're essentially pulling away education for those students. In as much as it is. If they're not taking advantage of it as it is, then that's obviously another side of the argument. But did you happen to send out a questionnaire or to try to get that sort of
I
data?
have a survey ready to go. If that's something that you would like me to send out, I'm happy to do so. We wanted to give this information out before making that next level decision about. So, and the survey basically says did you make a decision for your child's personal health or the health of somebody within your family? So we definitely need to think about that in terms of the impact that would have during a time like this. So as you can see, our sixth grade numbers that's why we would have to hire, regardless of whether it's just remote, just our hybrid kids are signing or hybrid kids and the students. Big group. So now we get into some costs. We are definitely looking at some storage units that would have to come. Our storage unit that we have on all of our storage units are filled to capacity right now. There maybe is some room in our new storage facility.
Yeah, the upstairs is available, we can cover roughly, we guess, 3 to 4 classrooms worth of, items.
So Mr. Grieve talked to Mr. Kofis, and they figure it on a minimum we would need probably about 5 40-foot containers. And in a quick Google search came up with that number is not exact, but it's an approximate. But we do know people in town. So if we're looking at the next 8 months having to rent some storage units, I don't know what the final cost would be, but there is a cost associated with that. We do have our 6-foot folding tables. We did purchase not last year but the year before, and we counted how many we have currently and how many we would need to purchase. So we're looking at, we would definitely need to get at least 18 more 6-foot folding tables for a cost of about $1,800. This doesn't include shipping and handling. Mr. Green went around to try to figure out what classrooms had tables in them that would need to be replaced with desks. As awesome as tables are, they don't ironically fit as many kids, so we would have to take some of the tables out of the classrooms. A lot of our younger grades do use tables, but we also have a good number of our middle school classrooms that have tables in them. Our K1 tables would be able to stay, but our second grade, we do have a second grade classroom that would need to take tables out. She's got the smallest classroom. So we would need approximately 94 desks. We do have chairs for every desk that we need to purchase, so we are looking at least a $15,000 cost for that, plus what the freight would cost as well. Yes?
Just have a quick question. I don't know if this is an issue, but I know for IT it's an issue. Because of the need, probably this is from a lot of schools, is any of these items back ordered?
Oh, we're sure that they are.
Because that's obviously going to play a role,
Mhm.
in whether you can get them here in time.
Yep.
Just as a
Yep.
side note.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We just priced them out as they were, but we did not check on stock. But that is something that we've considered thinking of. And as stated, we would need at the minimum our 3 long-term substitute teachers, and as you know, that's $160 a day because we're looking to hire somebody certified to take the position. That's going to come with a minimum cost of $72,000 if we're considering this for the rest of the school.
And we didn't calculate the cost of the extended people, based on their like, if we do the 2 drop-off times, we is roughly, I think, 9, 10 people that, like, we don't have a cost for that.
The before and after.
So, your long-term subs, that doesn't include the IAs right now, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So we can, like, essentially, I mean, if you're thinking that remote piece, you could just not have IAs as part of the remote, like we
Right,
we
yeah.
talked about that before.
Not
And we can-
necessarily inclined to think that we need to provide IAs to,
Right.
Or
And if
scaled
you-
down version, or, providing a day for them to plan their next group. I really know it'd be something we can do with what we currently have starting to do.
And the other piece is the preschool, you know, we can save on that case manager, if we don't, for preschool back then, that case manager can stay in the role they're fulfilling right now. And so we not have to fill that if we have preschool, so we can only provide for
services and needed. Yeah.
Have you guys considered or looked at, you know, I think what has scared me since we started this conversation, however many weeks ago, is eating the whole elephant at once. And what I'm coming around to and wondering if it'd be an easier lift is if we brought back K through 4, K through 5, like I've seen a lot of other schools doing. 6 through 8 seems to present the biggest challenges to us. So have you looked at a model where we keep 6 through 8 hybrid for the time being, and then we look at bringing in K through 4, K through 5, and in that same breath, I'd say probably, you know, at 6 to 8, while we make that transition, look at getting rid of the remote piece at the 6 to 8 level as well. Have you considered that at all?
I think we're open to
Yeah, we're open to
any suggestions that the board would like to present. You know, when we've been talking to the staff about, you know, it's not if we come back full, it's when are we going to do it? When is going to be the best decision? And if there's other ways to think about coming back full, I think we should consider it. If you're looking at a K to 4 scenario, we're not looking at any long-term subs at this point.
Right, we would still need the 2 drop-off times, so, I mean, there would still be factors rolled into that, like your specialists, you know, you wouldn't have those to support the remote piece and things of that nature, but, you know, there's pieces of the pie you're gonna have to give up, but, yes, that's totally a possibility.
We're also talking, I mean, this looks like a $93,000 hit to the budget, let alone all the other items.
Yeah.
I mean, it's early in the year still, to even have remotely a sense of whether or not we can absorb a $93,000 hit to our budget.
I don't know that right now, to be honest.
So, I mean, that's a whole nother facet that, you know. And where does that leave us? I mean, you either have to hit retainage if you overspent the budget.
Retainage only comes into effect if you, in a deficit. You literally have exhausted all revenues, all expenses, all budget appropriation.
This would be that circumstance.
But this would be that circumstance.
Right, so that still only
Well,
gives us,
yes and no. Trust funds might come into play too. They may look at it as you're not really in a deficit if you can offset your expenses utilizing your trust fund.
that would really, the only trust fund that would be applicable would be the special education trust funds. You wouldn't be able to pull your facilities funds in, or would they require you to include those as well, you know?
To be honest,
It's not a situation you ever wanna think about.
I don't
being-
want to ever have to think about it, and I hope it never gets there. And none of my districts have gotten there, but I remember one district came very, very close, and I remember reaching out to the Department of Revenue asking this question, and they did say that they're looking at all assets. So your trust funds would be, so anywhere they would potentially could pull from. You're truly not in an emergency if you have funds available. You may not have excess revenue available, you may not have budget appropriation available, but you would have trust funds available. So I will get clarification on that, but I do believe that the commissioner will look to say,
You have to zero everything.
you have, yeah.
Was that-
Technically, you're not in an emergency if you have funds available to you. They're just a different fashion.
Andy?
I was just gonna say, would that include the warrant article
That's what I mean. Maybe that would be the trust funds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, that most certainly plays a factor, right? So I think a question I have is, you know, we look at this decision-making matrix, and this looks like, and to Jeff's extent, maybe you start off with the lower grade levels, and maybe the impact for the students is gonna have, you'll have a broader impact on the students to bring back those earlier grade levels, probably more so than you would in the higher grades, and you'll be able to sustain a hybrid model for longer with less educational impact. Right? I mean,
Can I also just say, we had talked the other day that really it's the K to 2 who benefit from full in, and our middle schoolers, more so than even our 3-5s. We're having, I say, the greatest instructional challenges with our middle schoolers. So you think it would benefit the younger students more, but it's really on both ends.
Yeah, I mentioned it when we did that tour, that, you know, the teachers are kind of feeling it to the point where, because they have less kids, they're able to go through some of the curriculum a little bit faster and meet the needs of the students. So they're almost at par of where they would be normally, given that we had a later start and all this. But what's happening in the middle school is, middle school kids are going home, and on their work days, they're not doing, majority are not doing their work. So they're coming in, the teachers are planning, all right, Monday, this is the lesson, do your work on Tuesday, we're starting a new lesson on Wednesday, but they're backtracking to cover what the students didn't do on Tuesday. And probation numbers show that, the 4 or more missing in these lists show that. So unfortunately, the middle school kids are just not doing their end of the bargain by doing their work at home. And it's not saying all, but it's I would say more than half. And I think a piece of that puzzle too is there's nothing holding, and there's nothing over their head holding them to doing their work. Again, it's kind of like where we were 2-3 years ago with probation, where there was no, like the end of the year trip, you know, there was something established as saying that you're gonna not, do your part as a student, that you're not gonna have this, you know, reward or this opportunity. Right now, I mean, there's no field trips, like, you know, end of year trips, New York, everything's up in the air, so they don't see it as, there's no carrot. And why work when mom and dad are working, I can be home playing video games or whatever, hang out with my friends, riding my bikes, going fishing. So.
I'm living a great life.
GM.
Can I get there?
But, you know, in their middle school, like, they're young teenagers,
They're pushing their own boundaries.
yeah.
I mean, I guess where my head's at is, you know, the busing is the biggest lift for us, in my opinion, being not an educator. I look at the busing and it's just an absolute logistical nightmare that's scared me. The other portion of it inside the building, we're gonna have to make sacrifices. We're gonna have to hold our nose and say, okay, everyone's gonna be within their 3 feet. So it seems like bringing back a small portion, education aside from it, eliminates the issue we've run into with busing. It
helps maybe, I don't know, it's not gonna eliminate, you're still gonna double run.
That's the most helpful thing you said, is that the staff's kind of at that point where it's like not if but when. What are your thoughts on the double busing and having staggered start times? Is that going to be an absolute nightmare for you guys, or is we're just in a nightmare and what's one more nightmare?
I mean, I think the 5 through 8 on the current, so we were coming back full plan back in the spring for this year would be a 6-day rotation schedule, so you don't count Monday through Friday, you count A through E or whatever we have. But that's so like you come in, it's like, oh, F day I have art. Alright, so you don't say I have art on Friday, so you know your schedules kind of rotate differently. Kind of like if you have a middle schooler now, it's A, B, it's a blue, white, gold day. So by doing that, the schedule I built was that first period, there's no IAs, we try to avoid having IAs in the morning for any classes, allowing to have morning meetings, more of a responsive classroom, model. So by bumping it out the hour, that's what I based it on, the separation of the K to 4. So that allows for the IAs, so you're not in that situation where you're paying all the IAs their extra money. So you're not requesting the IAs to come in to stay for an extra hour every day. So building that schedule that way allows for, it's just the easiest piece of the puzzle to make work in all the craziness that it is.
So I was gonna say, and Kelly presented the two models where if she would far kids first and then the near kids, it lessens the stagger of the start times. But I think in terms of scheduling, that's not really helpful because then you,
That makes it worse.
yeah.
Oh, it makes
So,
it by far worse.
so I guess-
Because then you have kids in the afternoon who are,
to answer your question, would that be a nightmare? I think her first model would be very difficult to think about and schedule for. If you could do the grade split,
Yeah, well,
you could at least
that,
know who you're dealing with when, and plan a schedule around that.
you're almost operating a separate location in that case, right? So we're starting the elementary school, here we go. Now we're starting the middle school,
right.
here we go. And that most certainly seems like a cleaner approach than the kid got here when, the kid, this child gets here when they get there, because they live here and not there, and now your classroom's half occupied. I don't know how.
It's a nightmare, yeah, it's not
It's not
healthy.
It's not feasible.
No, it's not.
And there's no order, no regulation in the day, there's no rhythm.
And, you know, and one day you might expect a certain student to be there, but on that day they have to ride the orange bus, and now, you know, so, yeah, it's just a nightmare.
So at some point, so this goes back to the not a matter of if or, but when. So when this occurs, how long internally, I have questions about affording this, but how long do we need internally to prepare for this? And is this a 2-week process, a 3-week process, a 6-week process?
I mean, I think the main thing, again, if you're looking at what our plan is the hiring of those 3 teachers is an absolute, like, we can't not have those 3 teachers. We posted it a month ago, at the beginning of October. So, and we've had a few people, 2 people apply, but not full applications. And one person applied for world language, but they're not their certification has lapsed. And they're not French certified, but they speak French, they could teach French, but they're not certified French.
I'd like you, Zach.
Says the Irishman.
So I think that's a big piece of that this getting the right.
So I'm not going as far as this full return of my question, but let's say that was that sort of first step might be to bring back the K1, some of the younger kids perhaps. If we started there, and it sounds like we could still, with that, we could still manage it with the 6 feet and the masks. Is that correct at that age group?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so if we could do
We still
that,
have to give up the gym, I mean, you know, those things we still have to have.
Right.
Yeah.
if we could do that, if we could make the busing work, if we could kind of get the other pieces in line, not perfectly, but manageable. The thing we haven't talked about yet is the staff. And would the staff does that put any staff in a situation, so let's say we just talked about bus drivers, we would lose some bus drivers if we took this step. Do you feel like we would lose staff? Now, we can't replace staff. Would we lose staff if we did take that step, in terms of teachers or people in the building?
That has not come up. Our staff has said things like, oh boy, I don't know how we would get, like they can't imagine, right? But they couldn't imagine the hybrid model either, and they're rocking it. So I feel like if it's a decision that needs to be made, then we have to move forward with it, and if there's staff that's not comfortable with it, then we have to look through that, just like we would have to look for anything else. I don't have an exact number. I haven't heard that there's staff members that say, oh, no way, like, that's it, I'm done, I'm out of here, we have to do that. I've not heard that from any.
No. I mean, and again, we've talked about this will happen eventually, but no one's come to us with that Besides the people we've already mentioned.
Right, but it happening once the mask guidance is gone is different than it happening now with the mask guidance in place. So it happening, in a few months rather than now are two different conversations that teachers might feel differently about. Probably would feel differently.
The other piece is really the timing of it all. I mean, I know there's lots of conversation out in the state of New Hampshire and beyond about what's happening going into the holidays. I mean, I have families that are emailing me saying we're quarantining for 2 weeks because we want to spend Thanksgiving with our family, and so we're not sure how we're gonna make that work, but we'll figure it out. And then I have families that are like, let's go, let's get back full, we need to get in. So the timing of it all is, we've talked as a SA leadership, I've talked to other K-8 administrators in the state of New Hampshire. Superintendents have been in discussions with the commissioner about making a decision for the state of New Hampshire, and that's not gonna happen. That's pretty much a solid no that it's not gonna come from the governor down. So we are looking at the timing of this being going into the holidays. We're looking at travel. We have a quarantine. All the things that are currently in place will not change because we're that full. If a family travels, if a kid travels, they're out of school for 14 days when they get back to the state of New Hampshire. I have a couple families that are traveling, and they're not going to be here the entire month of November between their travel and their quarantine. So, and that's their decision. And they know it. But and then we come, we'll have to come back from Thanksgiving, and we've got a couple of weeks, and now we're into Christmas. So, it's the timing of it is I think important to take a look at. When you say how long would you need, I think we would need a couple of weeks because we need to get some interviews, we need to get some hiring going, and we need to consider what we're going into the holidays.
I think the timing's horrible, right? Like just between the media, the headlines, and then the holidays. And it's. I think that at the end of the day, families want to make that decision to travel and put themselves in that. We have to start at some point looking at the entire picture and not trying to accommodate everybody, and it sucks to say when there's 6 kids in remote learning in 8th grade that, sorry, we're pulling this away from you, or there's a family that wants to quarantine, is the time right and perfect? I think as a board we have to look at the entire school community and start moving in. This is just my opinion, but it's like we have to start moving towards that full open. I don't think the timing's ever going to be perfect. If we wait till after the holidays, then we're looking at January 14 if we want to be really conservative about it, right? And January 14 is a long way from October 21. So as far as timing goes, I think we have to we can always go back to the hybrid model if we see cases start to spike.
So the conversation right now, like the K to second, or are we talking about the?
I think we're just talking. I think it's an everything conversation.
Relaxing, philosophical.
I kind of want to solicit some input from Gigi because usually you come in from left field with this depth of wisdom that
Nuggets.
Yeah,
this
I got
little, this little.
Well, I mean, I've always been thinking, like, from the very beginning about who needs to be in person the most. And so I've been thinking a lot about, is there a way that our younger kids can get back full time? And not that I want to leave anybody out, but if we look at the impact of education, it's really looking at, getting people on the ground started. And I keep thinking in my head, what does that look like across the country with, 2 years worth of kindergarten and first graders not having the same kind of usual robust education. So I'm just wondering, like, is the about bringing our youngest kid, I don't know if that start with K through 2 and see how that goes, is that K through 4?
The other aspect of that approach, I don't necessarily disagree with it, is that's gonna have a different set of transportation questions as well, and does that require a stagger, or does that not require a stagger? I mean, there's a chance that you could, maybe with some help from families as well, say, listen, if we can get K2, K3, K4, whatever it is, back, what does the transportation end of it look like? And maybe we can do that without staggering, and that gives us the ability to get a third or a half of the students back full time, start that part of it up and moving, and then we can start looking at a way to address the rest of the student body.
And you know, it is hard, the timing piece again, that makes my head want to explode, because at the very same time, I just heard, I don't remember what school district it was, just sent a memo home and said, we will be remote from November whatever until January whatever, I think 14th. And that was because of the holidays. They were just like, we're just going remote for that
It was
period.
Chester.
Oh,
But maybe it was
Who was
Chester.
it?
Pinkerton? Justin?
It was Chester that did that. They just drew a line in the sand.
Well, because people are gonna travel or they're not, and it's just like
Quarantine.
decrease the risk. Boom, oh.
Well, and I think it was all the quarantine issues as well on top of that, and just kids missing instruction, and instead of it just being kind of a nightmare of trying to like keep track of like all of the issues. So, you know, I hear what you say that January is a long time away. On the other hand, you know, would that allow us enough time to have like a robust time to really plan to say, all right, we can do that, and by January we can bring K through 2 or K through 4 back, if we know that's where we're heading.
The bands of the remote classes are K1, 2, 3, and 4, 5.
We wanted
So maybe, you know,
bands one way or another.
do the
right?
bands rather than splitting up one of the bands.
Or K to 3.
Or K-
And so you've got two
Yeah.
bands, and then you look at bringing back, 4, 5, and then that leaves the middle school as, its own entity.
And then a conversation about middle school in terms of the remote piece, and do we restructure that a little bit so that, you know, we can give some time to our teachers, on Friday, if we want the remote piece to continue at least in the first half of the year, so, yeah.
So you said you have about a 20% participation rate on the remote side in the,
Probably less,
so we're talking,
At middle school, not kindergarten.
yeah,
Okay.
right? So let's just say
Like 4 kids.
6th grade is 4 kids out of the 14, 23 kids.
Is it really that low? I mean, like, really,
Yeah.
like, that's disappointing.
Right.
Not for our staff, but like, it's disappointing that this effort's gone out. The staff has invested so much time and energy.
Right.
So
It's insulting.
1,000%. Where I'm going with that is, it's like when we talk about revisiting that Friday and taking away that hybrid day for those kids that are in school, so that they can focus on. And I do not mean this to sound callous, but to focus on those 2 or 3 kids that are doing remote learning and give them all that attention on Friday. There's a huge surge of resources that could be going to the every other day cohort on Friday. It's
All right, well, because we need to try to compartmentalize this to a certain extent. So let's talk about, if we can, remote for middle school. So we wanna draw a line in the sand for remote for middle school and say, based on what we're seeing, it's gonna go away as of this date.
Yeah, and I'm happy to make that decision. I would like information on which kids will not have school as a result. Because there probably will be some who can't come in and who can't do VLAGs. So how many kids are we effectively removing any opportunity for school from? And does that mean that they have to be homeschooled? What is the alternative for those students? Are we just
It would be homeschool, or if we can get, if our numbers dwindle here, if we get them into VLAX, I don't know if there's any wiggle room or not.
Yeah.
We spoke with.
Looking at all the courses offering everything in the waitlist still. So I don't know, well, my question to them was, given our numbers, but again, I don't know about if saying 20 kids compared to 1 is gonna matter when there's something,
Right.
So you wanna survey out first before?
I had thought we had said that last meeting, but I would, yes, like that survey. And if I can have that, I know things are
Ready
busy.
to push out, Mr. Oxnard, I have it, it's literally done,
Okay.
so.
I'd be ready to make that decision now, but I would like that number, that's all I'm
And
saying.
I guess, back to the point though, that even if they are home for medical reasons, they're still not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and our teachers are still trying to get them roped in and pushing things out and helping, and it's just, and my heart breaks for that, for sure.
Okay.
Andrew?
Curious, so the material that we had for specific grades last year when we were all remote, is any of that transferable to, can we repurpose that? Is it still alive somewhere? We can say, hey, we're not doing remote anymore, but this is applicable to your grade.
That's a very interesting thought. It's a different time period,
Yeah.
so it's a different cover of curriculum, but it's a great thought.
Just think about how easy this is gonna be to last all year long. We already got everything after March covered.
Right.
March on,
We'll
John,
postpone and then
So it's like 3
restart.
months we don't have to find.
Yeah, March
We'll
is
define that. and
dealt
let's go
with,
the
it's
next
done.
month.
All right, so is the decision, Jeff,
No, you go first.
is the decision regarding remote for the middle school something that we're gonna make at the next meeting?
I'd like to make it now. I mean, I appreciate completely what you're saying, and there are kids that are going to be hurt by this, but with that information or without that information, it's not going to change my decision. I understand that we're going to be cutting off the education avenue to those children, but I know it's not 23 kids. It's a small percentage, and it's with or without that information, I'm prepared to make a decision tonight on that.
So, I think I wouldn't make it with it effective, there needs to be a window of 3 weeks, a month, whatever it might be, something, so that the families that need to plan accordingly can plan accordingly. Nothing we do, even if we said we're bringing all the kids back, fire in the hole, let's go, it's still a 2-week window, so nothing's gonna change for the operating circumstances for the middle school staff. I understand we'll burn them out a little bit, but I think I'm more inclined to let's see what the impact is. But we all operate on motion, so if you wanna make a motion, fire in the hole, see if it sticks.
All right, I would like to make a motion.
Fire in the hole.
I would like to make a motion that effective November 9th, we bring back K through 4 for full-time in-person education.
Oh, this is getting
And
ready.
on November 9th, we also eliminate remote education for the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Say that again, K to what?
K through 4.
You want, oh, okay.
Alright, so hold on, sorry. So we have a motion from Jeff to bring back K through 4 students full-time on November 9th, as well as discontinue remote instruction for the middle school
Correct.
on November 9th. Does that satisfy the 2 weeks? I guess it's 6 weeks.
Yes.
That would be 3 weeks.
So if we-
Oh, sorry.
No.
Yeah, I guess 2.5.
2.5. Alright. Do we have a second?
Second that for discussion.
Okay, so let's made it onto the floor, Jeff. So Go,
So,
sell it.
sold it pretty hard already. Bring back K through 4 is gonna avoid the hiccup that we'd hit with 5th grade. If we didn't have the 5th grade hiccup, I'd make a motion for that, but we don't. So, this is a small bite of the elephant, and it's gonna give us a chance to prove to, ourselves, the staff, the students, that we can do it safely, and, the obvious reasons for eliminating remote education, staff burnout, and minimal student participation.
Hey,
I'm personally not in favor of that at the moment, but I do want to point out that we did agree in a MOU that we would at least be, I forget what the word is that we settled on, but to not include or solicit a direct conversation with the staff that would be most directly impacted by this, I think would not be considerate on our part to make this unilateral decision. And so that motion is a little bit too aggressive for me at the moment without setting a little bit more of the stage to be able to move towards that.
Is Patty able to talk back at us?
Yes, Patty said if you're gonna ask her questions, to repeat it, so you'd have to get closer.
There you are.
It's hard to hear, so just talk louder.
I can bring her up
Patty's
closer.
gonna tune you up tomorrow, Amber.
Who do you want to say next to Patty?
I didn't think it.
Whoever wants to talk to me.
I've got the MOU right here.
Okay.
Are we allowed to?
Yeah, we can reference the MOU right now, correct, Patty?
Yes, it's public.
Okay.
Okay, so it says that we will provide, before moving to a less restrictive environment regarding the foregoing health and safety conditions, the district agrees to collaborate with the association. So we're not moving until November 9th, so we have plenty of time to collaborate when we're.
I'm sorry, plenty of time. Is 2 weeks to do all this collaboration
2
needs to
weeks.
happen? 2.5? Okay.
So, Patty, have you heard the discussion that's been occurring over the last, however long we've been having it?
The majority of it, I sometimes have a hard time hearing Nate, but yes, for the most part, I've heard it.
So Jeff has just made a motion, I don't know if you caught the motion. And so the current discussion is in regards to our MOU.
Yep.
And how that motion impacts the MOU and whether or not it, is in the spirit of the MOU. I think that's an appropriate way to say it. So, what's your take on that?
Well, I understand what Jeff's saying, that it hasn't happened yet, so there's time to collaborate, but in the spirit of the MOU, I feel like the intent was before you make a decision, we collaborate. That's just my opinion.
Before moving. Semantics.
So, based on that, and let's have some additional discussion, we've heard from Nate and Jeff in particular, Andy and Gigi have kept their thoughts self-contained for the last couple of minutes. I'm trying to draw them out of them. I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm in support of bringing some grade levels back. I guess the unforeseen costs kind of stick out to me. The busing challenges and the staff implications. So I guess I'm just kind of muddling around right now, just trying to weigh my thoughts on it.
I feel like there's an easy action we can take, which it sounds like is most obvious right now, is to address the middle school question. The middle school remote question seems to be the easiest one to tackle. Everything else seems to carry with it a big price tag, a lot of headache, a lot of work, which I'm happy to begin, but I'm not sure that we can say in 2.5 weeks, boom, let's all come back. That seems like too drastic a move for me, and so I would amend it. I won't make this yet. I'm happy to hear the conversation, but I can amend it. I'm happy to tackle the middle school question right now, but to throw in the full open of all the other grades, I think is asking too much at this moment in one motion.
Gigi?
I feel a little bit like, it sounds, I feel like 2.5 weeks is pretty quick. In knowing all the things that, because it's not the plan that's written on the paper here, it's a different plan, which has not really been planned for, it's just an idea, and now it has to be planned for. The other thing I heard you talk is like the grade span, so it makes, if we were keeping the younger remote, then K through 4 doesn't make any sense, because K1, 2, 3 might make more sense, because then we can still keep the younger kid remote piece rolling. And then my heart is breaking a little bit, and this is a separate piece, because Lisa, you talked about the middle school kids, and maybe that's some other outside the box answer that would come up for that lack of engagement. But it might be a clarifying question. You're saying that not just our remote middle school kids, but our hybrid middle school kids are struggling their butts off on the non-in-school day. Correct. Which then puts them really slowing down their education on the day they come in because they haven't followed up. So I just needed to clarify that for myself, but I think I don't want to muddle them, so I'll chunk them over here and say, okay, let's maybe think about something else for them. So, like, ideologically, I definitely, and I've been thinking that from the very beginning. How can we get our youngest kids back in, and how many can we get back? How many can we get back in safely? And I just didn't know how crazy it would be, because the logistics piece is not my.
I would be curious to ask the administration that question. So now if we could come back in 2 weeks, if we were to say, let's bring 2 grades back, would that look any more realistic than what we've been just presented with this evening? But we haven't asked that. And so to your point, there's no way we can execute that in 2 weeks without having actually asked it yet.
Yes. And then, like, in the broader picture, what I'm thinking is, while everybody else is thinking, like, okay, here comes the big fall wave, we're thinking of bringing more people back in the building. So I want to keep that timing. I want to be realistic about that timing.
I'm listening to Gigi this time. We could use more time in the earlier part, so it's true, it's tough.
Haven't you learned Gigi is always right?
Don't say that, that's not true.
Except for the one time.
If I may?
Yep.
So I think that one of the arguments that we relied upon in sticking with hybrid, you know, I heard everybody make it, was that we want to provide the best educational experience to the kids, and, you know, how do we know in hybrid that it's not a super positive experience because of the low student-to-teacher ratio? We just heard that these kids are not doing great in hybrid, and they're not working on the off days. And so I think we really need to take that into consideration, and we can't just use it as ammo against opening, you know, staying in hybrid, but then when we want to look at full, we suddenly take that ammo out, and it's no longer a valid argument. Clearly the kids are struggling and not keeping up.
Certain grade levels.
At a certain grade level. But on the same hand, I'm going to say you can't cherry pick, 6th grade, you know, sitting and trying to cherry pick grade levels, like, that's a road I'm not willing to go down. And the other thing I think we need to keep in mind is that the media is the media and America is America. Deerfield made it through March till now with 15 cases. And it's really scary that every time I go on the internet, I regret it because the headlines and everything. I'm not saying that we're not ever going to see that in our community in New Hampshire, but it's important to keep that in mind as we make these decisions that we're not the rest of this country, and we are Deerfield and we are New Hampshire, and we did a good job, you know. And sure, maybe it's because we went remote, but I think it's important to keep that in focus.
So we have a motion on the floor, so we can act on the motion, or we can amend the motion, or we can try to unpack the motion a little bit, but we have to do something with it. So, do we have anybody that wishes to to amend the current motion, or do you want to vote on the motion as it
Yeah.
says?
I'll move to amend the motion to read, I move that we discontinue the middle school remote in 2 weeks. Or 2.5
On
weeks.
Monday.
In 2.5 weeks. On
So
the 9th.
effective November 9th. Does that have a second?
Can I ask a procedural question?
Sure, Patty, tune in, Phil?
So if his amendment is accepted, could I then make another motion to address reopening?
Yes, I would say at that point, we would deal with the motion as it was amended and then dispose of that item, and then I would ask you to then make a motion to address the reopening.
Okay.
So his current amendment would be to change the motion to just discontinue.
I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay, so you withdraw your second, Phoebe?
Yes.
Okay, so Nate, let's go ahead and just,
Make a new motion.
you,
All right.
Amber on this, I see you frantically writing notes.
I'm good.
Okay, go.
Okay.
Move to discontinue remote instruction for the middle school, 6, 7, and 8.
Yeah, but no, I might wanna, I'll say stick with the same date, which was, I think, the 9th of November.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is a motion by Nate. And a second from somebody,
And I just read and just, try to make sure I have it right.
Yes.
please.
Just maybe one line of effective November 9th. Remote learning will be discontinued for middle school.
For grade 6, 7, and 8.
Yeah.
So
Second.
that's a Monday.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. We have any discussion regarding the discontinuation of remote instruction for the middle school effective November 9th?
Now that I've made the motion, I'm not sure that I'm gonna vote for it, just partly because I am concerned that I wanna hear about, I want more information about these students who will be affected by
There
this.
will be a meeting before November 9th. Betty, you gotta yell. I'm not looking at you the entire time.
I'm not gonna yell.
You're in my blind spot.
I'm just wondering if it would meet Nate's concern if there was some, we had talked earlier about unless you have permission by the administration. So do you wanna give Kristen some leeway so that if she finds out there's, for instance, 2 families with dire situations, health issues at home, she could give some kind of a special permission, or just leaving it a little more open for administration?
Yes, that's what I wanna hear more about. Can you, so just let administration, you're saying let administration decide, the extra piece of the motion, would that be that administration would have the means to be able to address this on a case-by-case basis in some way that would be educationally reasonable?
Okay.
No, I think that was a yes.
Yes.
Okay, then can I, do I need another amendment?
Well, who's next?
So, hold on. Yes, you need to amend your motion,
Okay.
but you just rattled out a paragraph when I think you were trying to.
No, that was a question for Patty, that wasn't a motion, that was more of a question, but it sounds like she said yes. Maybe Kristen, do you feel like there is a way of doing that? If there's 2 families who can't come back in, can't go to VLAX, do you feel like the school has recourse as a way, what?
Resources.
Yeah, or recourse, a way of addressing it, or the resources, yeah.
I mean, I think, in speaking with the 8th grade team actually brought this up today, regardless of whether pushing out, remote for 6 students or 40 students, it doesn't, it's the same amount of work. So if we're saying we're gonna take off the remote piece, but you still have to provide for these 2 kids.
Yeah.
We'll just keep providing for everyone.
Valid point. It's the creation of material that's the work, it's not the quantity of the students.
And a piece of that is obviously grading and things like that, where 40 would be more grading time, but the actual upfront work is causing the stress, is causing the fears, is causing the countless hours of work outside of work.
Okay. So at the moment, Nate, your motion has not been amended.
No, yeah, I didn't mean to amend, no, I didn't
Okay,
no, it was just my initial, yes.
So the current motion on the floor, unless there's additional discussion around it, let's go ahead and have a vote on the current motion on the floor, if there's no additional
I would
discussion.
like to amend the motion,
Okay,
and I would like to amend it out to 3 weeks.
so that would be the 15th of November?
Yeah.
16.
16th,
I feel like that's just a little bit more fair to families.
Okay.
If I'm a family and I've gotta make arrangements, it it puts the light at the end of the tunnel still for staff, but yet I feel like 3 weeks, I don't know why I feel that way, but I just feel like for me, 3 weeks is better than 2 weeks.
I'll second that.
To get a whole new
Does that
plan.
give us 2 meetings between now and then, or just one?
It gives us one meeting, well, SAU meeting next week and then us again after that. And then probably another meeting. No, maybe not.
So we'll meet on the fourth,
The fourth.
and then.
We have the 4th and the 18th.
We're not, okay. All right.
I seconded that, by the way.
So that, the motion's been amended to November
It hasn't voted yet.
16th. The motion's been amended.
We haven't voted on the amendment yet.
Right.
It's been
I'm
seconded.
sorry.
The amendment has
There's a
been
motion
seconded.
to amend the motion to the 16th. Yes,
Motion.
okay, so all in favor of the amendment of the motion to change the date to the 16th? Sorry, I have that organized in my head.
Aye.
Aye, okay. Additional discussion regarding the motion, which is now the 16th.
Quick question, why we wouldn't end on a Friday? Okay, I'm happy to end on a Friday.
Yeah, I guess that's what I meant. I'd be beginning. I don't know. That's what I.
Start on the day.
We'd start on the
Yeah, so
Monday.
As of the 16th, it would no longer be, so it would, I mean, I think it's.
So if it was
So if it's,
discontinuing remote instruction, the discontinuation would happen on the 13th.
Which is a Friday.
Which is, like, it would stop on the 13th and then not continue. If it stopped on Monday,
Got it. Friday the 13th.
I guess my thought was it didn't occur on Monday, because it already stopped on Monday.
okay, so that, either way, that's what works.
Whatever.
Yeah,
Very good.
the last day of remote instruction would be Friday the 13th.
Oh, it is 2020.
Okay.
Did
Do
you
we-
expect anything different?
Do we need to change the
No, I'll
motion?
stick with that one in my communication will be the last
Yeah,
thing.
but-
All right. So-
And I'll make sure to put a meeting in there too.
Because you know what happens after 9 o'clock.
Yes.
We're there. So, at this point, the motion is to end remote instruction, for November 13th, but the motion reads the 16th, because it wouldn't be continued on Monday. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Aye. Anybody, no?
Okay.
1 nay. 4 to 1. Jeffrey?
I'd like to make a motion that the administration begins to work with the association staff to resume K through 3 education
Hold on.
full-time, K through 3, with a, start with the goal of commencing education full-time in person November 16th.
Okay. Everybody got that? So that's the motion. Do we have a second for that? I'm looking for a second. Anybody?
Second for discussion.
Second from Andy. Jeff?
I'm
So,
gonna beat this horse. I'm not gonna keep beating it.
alright, so, currently we have a motion from Jeff, seconded by Andy, to resume full-time in-person instruction for K through 3 as of 11/16. Nate?
I would rather, and it wouldn't require a motion, I would rather ask to hear the outline of a plan in our next meeting. And then at that point, weigh the plan and think about it, and then, try to envision it, and then move forward with perhaps a motion looking into the future. But I don't feel like I want to commit to a date right now, which is 3 weeks away.
Listen, I tried committing the dates way back when, and
I know. Right?
I died. I fought for him tooth and nail, so I'm gonna leave this one up to you guys.
Let me speak a little bit to that, to
Please.
this point.
Yeah, if you have,
If I think about so this is the plan for a full return. What's taken off the table here would be a staffing issue, that's not on the table. Transportation would be on the table, we'd have to work that piece out. We would have to work out the available space, so we would have to be working on, turning the gym into a cafeteria, so we would have to be working
get
on
away
that.
with half the gym in that case, drop the curtain and
That's
use.
what we might be able to.
And in the stage, maybe
Maybe.
if we have to.
Yeah.
but-
Continue with lunches in the classroom for some kids and cafeteria for other
Yeah, we might
kids.
be able to put it, yeah,
Still
I mean,
utilize.
I can, come up with
Manipulate that a little bit.
It's a matter of figuring it out longer.
And we would be looking at a second grade class transitioning into desks, but I think that, we could get right on that and perhaps even be able to see if we can find desks,
I have something to share, like, yeah, I mean,
piece something together. So the plan for full would just, those, the pieces that would really, we have to work out would be the transportation piece
So, I mean,
I guess, well, I think it's the transportation piece and
in the cafeteria.
and cafeteria and, but also the staggered.
right,
Possible
but,
staggered start and the amount of money that has to be spent for these, well, it wouldn't be as many because now we're not, gonna be like, kind of split the nurse. It'd be maybe cut in half, instead of 9, you'll get like 4.
right, and so from an execution point, you've really already figured out the execution on that, you're just not applying it to 8th grades, you're applying it to four grades. So I mean, that part's been kind of figured, we're selecting partial.
Can you get the desks and tables in by that time?
I don't think the tables would be an issue, right? That's like a Walmart special type of deal, or,
We would definitely, I mean,
Yeah,
there,
I get,
I think
you know,
today's,
Amazon and Wayfair, you know, yeah.
today's point, there probably are some things that we need to make sure we hammer out.
Right.
But it's not as heavy of a load as a full return. Like
Yeah,
all-
3.5 weeks would definitely be more manageable.
Okay, that was part of my
And is
question
that
I had, is 3.5 weeks give you enough time, do you believe, or do you feel like you need to have that conversation with the staff first as?
Yes, I'd like to hear from the staff too.
So,
Yeah.
I guess my mindset is, we tear the Band-Aid off and say, okay, this is when we wanna do it. If the staff, if there's major objections from the staff, there's a part of me that says, well, then let's adjust it if we hear some major objections from the staff. I've tried to fight this fight once before and lost, but if that's the case, let's hear the objections and then change course, but to start to try to set a course, let's,
Yeah, I think the clear thing with the motion is that it doesn't say it's a hard start. It says to
Right.
begin working
Well, with
with
the
staff and the association with the goal of having K-3 in the building November 16th. If they come to us and say full stop, it's not gonna work. The motion's not forcing it open.
then we figure it out. Now, the other question for you, so, in that plan, I'm sorry, in that K-3 to start, we do not need the full-time, long-term subs?
No, for fifth, no, because fifth grade would stay, hybrid, sixth grade would stay hybrid, and even if our students return for sixth grade, in a hybrid fashion, I have to crunch those numbers.
We might have to move some people around our cohorts, we might have to say, we could be willing to change, you know.
Okay. But, I mean, nothing drastic, but that also gives us time to continue to hunt for those full-time subs, so that we can get to that plan, while still trying to optimize what we can on the lower grades. I saw him.
Yeah, to kind of follow up on what you said, we're gonna be meeting again on the 4th, this group, so over the next 2 weeks, Kristen, the administration, will have an opportunity to engage with the staff and try to gauge their feedback, and then if we come back on the 4th and Kristen and Brian are like, not gonna happen, I mean,
Then we have a conversation.
then we need to readjust the 16th.
Okay. I'd like to solicit input from Patty, if you've heard this conversation. Now you're on
Thanks, Zach.
now you're on the spot. See what happens when you're not here?
As long as the collaboration with the, association is part of the motion, then I would be comfortable with it. I'm just worried about if something's not gonna work out and you wait 2 weeks, then you're only giving parents a 2-week notice. So we can't send notice out to the parents of any change until we make sure it's gonna work, but I guess we could work around that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's just part of the logistics of it, right? So I mean, this whole year has been about flexibility
Yep.
and having to kind of fly a little
Yeah.
differently than normal. So it sounds like we've had some discussion. Is there additional discussion from anybody around this table or sitting on it on a laptop? Seeing none?
I guess I just wish we had a medical professional on the panel. You know, somebody say like, are we crazy to be, let's put more, you know, I have that in the back of my mind.
Maybe.
And I'm not afraid of the media, and I don't listen to all the media, and I'm not all of America, so just take that back.
I was talking to Andy, not
No,
you.
you didn't.
More importantly, if there was a medical professional here, they'd go, why would you ever run to be on a school board? In a small town during
That
the
was a
pandemic.
psychologist.
Yeah, they'd be looking at you going, what's wrong with you? All right, let's take a stab at least, disposing of this, because we still have some depth in our agenda, and it's getting late. It's past my bedtime. So, I'm not kidding.
I believe you, that's fine.
So we will collaborate, I think we'll change, we'll collaborate with the association,
Yeah,
and give you some feedback on November 4th, and come forward with a more solid plan.
try to make it happen for November 16th. Everybody's on the same page?
Oh, there's a motion.
We voted?
We're gonna, yeah, we're motion, just making sure we're all there, we're done discussing. So, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Saying aye. Nate?
Nay.
Nay, 4-1. Okay, do we have any additional discussion to continue with revolving the, school reopening draft plan, et cetera? Anybody? Seeing nothing? Okay, let's try to burn a couple of items here. PTO report. PTO, anybody?
Right now I got zero on Saturday. And the yoga site, which was successful, Spirit Wear starts October 30th. Sending home order forms, and we were doing Thanksgiving dinner raffle, and that also starts October 30th.
Awesome.
That's all I got.
Thank you.
It's great seeing the masks around the building.
All right, executive board report, Nate.
We did not meet.
All right, principals report, Ms. Withy.
Just a few things,
Okay,
I just banged it out, on a
One
piece of
page.
paper.
It's not even
Not even.
go.
Our soccer and cross-country team season is starting to wrap up. We do have one more cross-country meet. Our kids have been doing great. They had a meet against Candia yesterday. The girls swept the meet, and the boys, I think, had 17 points. I don't know what that means, but you runners out there know what that means.
It's one more than 16 points.
And 2 more than the girls. Our professional development day last Friday, October 9th was very successful. We did 90-minute rotations of teachers doing different things. I gave them a ton of time to work on all things that they needed to be working on, but also tied in some work that to develop them professionally as well. So I feel like we kind of balanced out the day by giving them their time, but also giving them some good information. We did have an emergency operation plan last week. Denny Gregg was here. We did update the EOP with some pandemic language, specifically around fire drills and that type of thing. So she has the draft, and we'll be putting it into a final format. We had CPR here this afternoon, first aid tomorrow afternoon. Tons of staff have participated. And then coming up, just to throw this out there, the parent-teacher conferences are still happening on Tuesday, November 3rd, and they will be held virtually.
Awesome. Questions?
Another question. I don't know if it's procedural or I've been dropping the kids off, and we went from like outside temperature checks and stuff like that.
Yep.
And now I'm not seeing it to be shifted to inside.
Yes, no, so we started off the year doing it for the month of September. We said we'll do it for the month of September. We literally had 0 finds of a temperature on kids. All of the guidance, the New Hampshire guidance, basically, we did that above and beyond what anybody needs to do, but the kids are supposed to be checked at home. I had put an email out a couple weeks ago with that update. So we did it for the month of September to see, kind of gauge where we were. Nobody came in with a fever, so we did stop that. if kids have a fever, it's actually they were coming down to the nurse throughout the course of the day, not first thing in the morning.
Is there any reason why we wouldn't continue it? Is it just because of the state policy or the?
There was, like I said, we did it for the month of September just to get a sense of, that's okay, just to get a sense of what was happening. There were no temperatures found, so it was an extra step that we didn't need to do in the morning. And it's supposed to be done at home, and all the guidance says that's the piece that's supposed to be done at home anyway. I don't know more than that.
I guess would there be any resistance to trying to continue to do something like that?
For what reason?
Basically the same reason that we did it to begin with, just to afford us the opportunity to catch kids with potential for when they're coming out of their car or when they're coming off the bus versus going to their classroom, spending a couple hours there, maybe even just 10 minutes, and then going to the nurse's office.
Right, so literally any fever that has come to the nurse's office has been at some point throughout the course of the day, never first thing in the morning. It just was not, there were no kids coming off buses or out of cars with fevers.
Oh, it takes what, 4 hours for the time all the way around?
That's a good point.
I mean, I hate to say it, but.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Any additional questions for the principal? None? CRP, Gigi? No meeting. Okay, Jeffrey, on the high school.
We are
I'm sorry, building expansion.
Yeah, we are working on putting together the ad for getting committee members, community members on the committee. Gigi just sent me her edits, so we'll be getting that out there. The question I have for you is, how do we advertise that?
Patty will facilitate.
Like, can we put it on social media? Nate always is our de facto, but.
Publishing for the committee members for the building committee.
Advertising for you?
Yeah, will you facilitate that?
Yep, just send an email to me and copy Kathy.
Done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Anything else, Jeff?
That's it.
Okay, and high school, Nate.
Mr. Langley and I met to sketch out some initial steps for our committee, including what kind of a committee we're looking at and how to start to populate that. And so we'll be in a similar phase as the previous committee in a few days, put together some sort of a request for people. But what we were thinking is that it would be a broad range of community members, some parents, but also some non-parent community members. Again, sort of variety, and a committee size of something like 7-ish voting people, which would probably be 2 board members. We wouldn't want to have 3 board members voting, but we may have 3 people interested in being in the meetings, but we wouldn't all be voting.
Part of the conversation Nate and I had was, I think at this point for the high school committee, although I will most certainly be participating, I will refrain from voting on any of the committee actions so that we don't have Vanny's on that committee as well, so that we don't have a quorum of board members voting on the full board. It seems like a much cleaner way for us to manage that work. So that was a conversation we had, and I think it's a better way for us to handle that. All right, so anybody that decides to watch this that has interest, there will be notifications going out for the building and the high school committee for the work that will be ongoing for that, for anybody that wishes to participate for that, and there'll be directions on how to get considered for one of those roles if you're interested in it. It should be a interesting process on both. All right.
Certainly.
Patty, I don't know if you heard earlier, but we made the decision, I don't know if you're there, to table the policies until our next meeting. So I'm going to hold those until you're here with us to review. So that brings us to informational items. Nate had requested that we discuss basketball.
Yeah, and now it sounds like it might be even more complicated. If half of the gym or all of the gym are actually,
Speak up.
yeah. It sounds like my basketball question is getting more complicated, especially if the gym or half the gym is actually our lunchroom. And so the question is basketball, and you know, we did move back in the fall to start volleyball, but volleyball didn't happen, not because we weren't supportive of it, but my understanding is that there weren't enough students signing up for it or willing to participate in that sport this year. The governor just shut down, as far as I know, if this is accurate, all of the hockey rinks in the state.
Yes.
Athletics indoors with a coronavirus is not a good idea. So I guess my question is are we, as a committee, as a board, considering bending our policy regarding basketball? It's not necessarily a school event, it's a community event, and there's a lot of community members who in the past have been interested in coming in and participating in that program using our facilities. And I'm not proposing an answer right now, but it's something that we might want to think about going forward. But if basketball doesn't happen in our building, hypothetically speaking, this year, then is it not necessarily incumbent upon us to provide an alternative, but could we coordinate with the rec department and consider using our outdoor spaces for other activity options for the kids in our community? Could we consider making snowshoeing available or whatever else, something that's an outdoor activity that we could in some way facilitate in a similar way that we usually facilitate? We don't facilitate the basketball, but it does happen in our facilities. Could we coordinate with rec to do something like that, to provide an alternative to indoor basketball, especially if it's not going to happen if the governor shuts down basketball like he shut down hockey, as far as I know, for the winter. I don't know if that's
So I
true.
hear two questions in there.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, it's just an informational, there's no real,
No,
you know.
but I think this is a conversation for maybe our next meeting is we need to have a conversation regarding, like we did with fall sports, the conversation regarding winter sports, whether or not they occur, they don't occur, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then it sounds like the second question that you had packaged in there was in regards to parks and recs, maybe ability to use the facilities in one way, shape, or form to the benefit of the kids in the community.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Hey, Zach.
yes.
Sorry, so Cindy actually contacted me today to ask to be on the next agenda to talk about basketball and sports.
There we go.
And we got an email from Nick is going to talk to Kristen about having basketball, so both of those things are on the agenda already.
So November 4th, we'll have that conversation.
Yes.
Giddy up. Okay. I believe,
There was one other.
informational item that I believe we're gonna probably discuss briefly in non-public first.
We don't really need to.
Okay.
No action needs to be taken on the number 7 informational.
Okay.
No action needs to be taken.
No.
Okay. All right. So in that case, we have public comments for Patty.
Did you want to talk about the informational item though?
Oh, I'm sorry. So no action taken. It's past 9 o'clock. It's bedtime. Let's go. All right. What do you got?
So we want to congratulate and offer a huge thank you to Julie O'Brien, who has found a teaching position that she's been looking for quite some time. Means we're going to lose her in our building, but wanted to let everyone know and sort of thanking her and appreciating all her years of service.
Absolutely. Certainly. Awesome. All right. Now, can I solicit for citizens' comments, Patty?
You can.
All right, citizens, anybody have a comment? Christina, please.
It's like the most comfiest chair. That's not my comment.
You look like
but
you're
it-
about to take a nap.
I
back
know, it
there.
has made the meeting a lot better, I'm not gonna lie.
This chair's hard.
Yes.
I just wanna make 2 quick comments. First, on the temperature taking issue, or temperature taking subject. I think it's not a step that we need to consider bringing back. I think that it has, been shown that temperature
they only presented, I think the last thing I read was less than 10% of COVID cases, so we don't think it's a good indicator. Also statistically in pediatrics, temperatures spike in afternoons, which is why we're seeing that nurses, their kids coming throughout the day, going to the nurse. I'm sure all of us have had a child who's woken up from a nap and is burning hot, and that's part of the reason. So I just wanted to make that quick comment. And then the only other thing is, as I was listening, I do wonder how the staggered start times affects the busing population because of siblings who are maybe in different start times and they're still taking up one bus seat. So we may not see that number scrub out as much as we wish that it would, given sibling groups are now not sitting together. They're still taking up the same amount of bus seats because of the staggered start. So I would just want to, maybe mention that to Dale. I would be curious to see whether or not that would even, whether or not that number would scrub out and whether it would impact if staggered start makes a measurable impact. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional citizens' comments? Seeing none, I believe we have our non-public, so, per NHRSA 9183, small letters A and E, I will look for a motion to go into non-public. Moved by
Second.
Nikki, seconded by Nate, requires a roll call. Nate?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Zach? Yes, sorry. Susie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Andy, yes, all right, it is 9:32, we are going to non-public. Nate, did you retire again?
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Yours?